I did.
Hey!
I did. I'm still waiting. Okay, there it goes. It really had to think about it for some reason.
Yet another smooth transition as we start our episode of Lorebeards, as we were sitting there going, have we pressed buttons, haven't we? Haven't we? Why hasn't it started? And then suddenly it starts when we're halfway through the has it started conversation. Hello and welcome to Lorebeards. I trust you can hear us out there. Do please drop some comments saying that we are coming in loud and clear over on Twitch and YouTube, where we are, of course, streaming live.
Yeah, so it's lovely to have you all joining us this Sunday. I'm actually feeling quite good this week, which is nice. I got back to taking all the supplements, like my fiber pills and everything I enjoy taking. It's like, wow, I have so much energy and I feel so good and awake all of a sudden, all the time, which is nice. But yeah, things are going really well. Also, listener Chris, thank you very much for the 21 months. I really appreciate that. That is quite some time. But really excited for this one. Gonna go ahead and open with a very blunt point, which is we kind of talked about it, and I spent the last 3 hours this morning just catching up and rereading a lot of things, and fell deeper and deeper down the hole of there's a very high chance that this might be the first character, even though we probably should have done this in the past, which is something I might talk about a little later. But this is probably going to be the first character where this may very well be a two-part episode.
Not really the first character. We sort of did that with Sigmar, and we sort of did that with a few others too.
That's true. It's true. There are other characters we should have done it with. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, you're right. There are a few characters we should have done it with, and I'm going to reinforce that warning. Morathi is arguably the most important character in Warhammer, and this is a bold claim for me to make, but I'm making it. Morathi is an exceedingly influential character, so much so that sometimes even the writers themselves aren't aware of what they've created and just how extraordinary she actually is, to the point that she really doesn't fulfill her true capacity and potential in terms of what they've written until we hit Age of Sigmar. And I find it fascinating because Age of Sigmar sort of looked at it and went, holy shit balls, look at this, and kind of ran with it. Where alternatively, Warhammer did a slightly different thing, but by doing so have created not just one of the most powerful, influential, important characters, but also one of the most interesting, fascinating, and really misunderstood characters in Warhammer. I am really looking forward to this one because of all of our streams, this one is going to be one that I think dives into a lot of material that you might be surprised is going to be dived into for what is effectively a Dark Elf Sorceress.
Yeah, this is, for me, the perfect episode to demonstrate how, for instance, the Warhammer Wiki has some severe reading comprehension problems, which we'll get into, which has led to a lot of people not understanding how Morathi really works. I genuinely consider her one of the best characters. If I was ever going to give someone a quiz on the setting to demonstrate to me that they understand a lot of the core concepts and principles and important characters, Morathi I would genuinely use as the gotcha character, like the, oh, are you actually paying attention to class character? Because a lot of writers have goofed aspects of her really, really hard. Some writers have killed it, though.
Yeah, I'm going to go slightly further in this. It's not that they've goofed. I don't think that's quite right. I think what they've done is they've only taken aspects of her character and not taken the overall creation that has been built. And because of that, they have left us with some interesting different versions of what Morathi is. So there's never really a mistake in Warhammer. We all know that it's constantly rewriting and reworking its background. And Morathi is a character that looks like it has been rewritten and redone multiple times. But I think we're going to argue here that she hasn't, and that she's been consistent pretty much from the beginning right through to the end, even when writers are absolutely certain that what they're writing is inconsistent with what she is.
Yeah, God, there's so much about her. Like, she's, you know, I've often waxed lyrical about how I wish that Warhammer Fantasy got the amount of attention and love that like the Horus Heresy does, as far as like exploring the setting and allowing characters to be developed. Morathi is about as close as it gets to a character that if you bounce around between all the books she appears in, you actually get a surprisingly in-depth story, but it's split across a lot of different storylines.
Yeah, a lot of places.
But there's a lot there, which is why I was sitting there reading through stuff and going, oh, I really want to talk about that. Oh, I really want to talk about that. Oh, I really want to talk about that. And then you sit there and go, well, shit, I can't do this in 3 hours. I can't. It's not possible. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so be aware we have a lot that we're going to discuss here. But as always, before we dive into our first intro, let's go dive through our opening super chats as everybody gathers now that the stream has started. We will aim to stop our super chats approximately quarter past, and then we'll dive into our intro, and then we are going to deep dive into everything that is Morathi after that. Take that as you will.
Man, thank you for the cheer. Dark Elves. To quote VTuber Stimpack, Canadian war crimes. There's been an ongoing in the what I would call the approaching Warhammer for the first time fandom. I always love to see if someone looks at the Darkest and they go, oh, well, that's obviously the Americans. Or if they go, oh, well, that's obviously the Canadians. Because it says something about them that I always find very funny. Because I can understand how you could end up down either pathway. Donovan again, hoping the stream could give a better impression of Morathi because on the surface, she seems to suffer from the same issue as Neferata. Games Workshop, while there are more powerful characters in martial combat, this lady is a master manipulator with complex schemes that are subtly influencing the world. Oh, cool. Can we have some examples? Games Workshop, they are master manipulators.
Don't
worry about it.
I'm going to criticize the writing in a few places here because Morathi is the character they built is so extraordinarily important and influential and often gets sidelined in descriptions or sidelined in the army lists even for other characters, but we'll be going into that.
Honestly, something that I think I should be able to prove this stream, the funniest thing about Morathi is that the writers that talk a lot about her like origin, her past, accidentally make her elder days. She is a god tier, S tier manipulator that had a horrifically dramatic impact on the setting. And then as she gets more and more into the spotlight, that's where it tends to suffer more and more because she kind of becomes more of like, this is the tabletop character, where she does a lot less of the actually good scheming stuff and more of like pew pew. But we'll get into that. Singemeister. Could/would Bray Shaman's harness Gyran?
They should.
I mean, there's no great reason why they shouldn't, other than
they really should.
We've talked about this.
This is a classic example of using blunt stereotypes and simple rules for the battle game, where the battle game often focuses upon one or two thematic lores for each one of their different wizards, sorcerers, mages, whatever you wish to call them. They're spellcasters. And this is something that Morathi also suffers from, where often she's just given dark magic, or in different versions of her, dark magic and Slaanesh magic, where in fact she has all of the magic. Literally all of it. And in some iterations of her, they say, yeah, she's got every single spell in this area. In others, they just go, yeah, it's just dark magic and shadow magic, particularly when you move to the modern era of, I say modern, 8th edition version of the rules, where they tend to go for 2 or 3 of the colors plus their core magic, in this case dark magic. So yes, Bray Shamans absolutely would be tied into the very magic of the land around them that they are constantly moving through, but they are much more closely associated with Gur. But I do think many of them would be doing that, yes.
Yeah, this falls victim to the thing we and Andy have talked a lot about, where sometimes writers, especially with the core battle game, will try and say that some of the lores of magic are evil and some of them are good. So like life and light are good and death and shadows are evil. And it's not how it works. But the lores of magic are not.
They are all
moral.
equally evil, and they are all equally good if you can view such things, because every single one of them, I understand Nick Kobold.
I might be gay, but I would for Morathi.
I mean, it's understandable.
That's very funny. It's not often you get to see it phrased that way. That's very funny to me. Darius Rose, Andy browbeating us, voting for Morathi. I want mommy. I want milk. I want to be held and comforted. If you don't do any of this, I'll ruin your life.
This is gonna go places.
Yeah, Morathi has very much been a long time coming, though. Like she's really important. Biful King, quick what if idea. What if an Arian's first 2 children were returned earlier and were raised alongside Malekith? Would that have changed events at all?
Yes.
Would have changed a lot.
Yeah, it would have changed quite a lot.
I'm deliberately avoiding elf what ifs for a little while.
Because
there's so many of them.
There's so many of them, and that's because the elves are so core to the Warhammer setting, and the story of Warhammer is almost the story of the elves, which is very upsetting to anyone who isn't an elf player, but it is kind of true. The lizardmen, that you really feel like that should be their story, they're often sitting in the background going, well, you know, there's a plan and stuff, but they're being exceedingly unproactive, where the elves are changing the world with their decisions. So, yeah, most of the what-ifs could very easily just be elf what-ifs for eternity, but we're trying to avoid that.
Yep. The spice of life is variety, after all. Godzilla 2021, completely unrelated, but I'm praying for my boy Godzilla because Death Battle's having him fight the Hulk today, so my anxiety/excitement is high. I'm looking forward to that Death Battle just because it's going to be stupid fun. I never get too invested in them. I just like the animations. They're very cool. I hope one day they get a Warhammer character on there. That way I could be mad about it for once. Darius, a Narian sloppy seconds until he comes back to his true love. Me! Oh, okay. I mean, I thought that was going somewhere else for a second, but okay. You know what? There you go. Morathi's here. What a surprise. I'm back, bitches. That is true. I am the most important character. I've done it all. I've seen it all. I've killed it all. I've slept with it all.
Arguably, yes.
Arguably, yeah. Ricky Chapman was building a Nurgle army, and Nurgle loved it so much that they've sent us a gift of pestilence. I can't tell if you're saying that you're sick or if you're talking about your roleplay campaign.
It does sound like you're sick. And in that case, get well soon.
Yeah. Biofoot. Does her arc into Age of Sigmar change her character a lot? No. Which is good.
Yeah, I would actually argue that the Age of Sigmar arc, in many respects, is not just justified by her Warhammer background, it is entirely the obvious next steps, and arguably, some of those steps should have been taken earlier, and probably were in some degrees.
Yeah, I'll talk about it a little later, but I was doing my research this morning, I read several passages that were printed well before the End Times was on anybody's radar, like well before the End Times was in the planning scheme for GW. And there were Black Library authors that did a very good job with Morathi, and you're reading and you're like, wow, this is really setting up super well for her Age of Sigmar arc. Like, this is almost prophetic, that's a good sign. That's a very good sign. Does any character serve more cunt than Morathi? No.
I'm not sure that is necessarily true at all. Morathi is a complicated character that I don't think is necessarily the way many portray her, particularly given when you actually look at what she does in comparison to what people says she does. They're two very different things.
What I'm curious about is, does Andy know what to serve cunt actually means nowadays?
Okay, tell me what it means just to make sure. Let's find out.
It's like someone that has like very, very strong aura or very strong
that's Morathi.
Yeah, okay.
That is not how I would use it as a Scottish person. As a Scottish person, I would just say, yeah, it's being served. But if we're doing it that way, fair enough.
Okay. It's one of those newer internet phrases. It's just one of the few I'm familiar with.
Hey, I'm old. Look at my beard. I'm gray.
Scallywag. Here's my favorite character, the first bride of Cain, even beating out the twin goddesses. Oh boy, there's a story there, which we'll get into.
Yeah, we've got some fun ahead of us.
Let's see. Omnicide. Perfect timing. Just in the car home from the annual family LAN party week. I wish my family had annual LAN parties. Geez, your family's cool. Looking forward to coming up with really good questions on Morathi 5 months later on my third rewatch. Hey, you know what? We're always around. We're always available.
True fact.
Niastra, please note that Morathi has not done it all. She has not gone into the Wildwoods. I dare her to go in there. I would bet you there would realistically be a story of her going in there at some point.
Yeah, it's just worth noting, Niastra, that often in Morathi's exceedingly spotty history, because there is eons here where often we get like one detail every other century. And often that detail is a Morathi, somewhat upset, decided to just go over there and do it herself. And yeah, this is something that I could very much see her having actually done.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about like a 7,000-plus-year-old lady. She gets around. Yeah. Stephen Lucas, Alariel stream, suggest her plans like juggling many plates. Don't mind if some failed because has many more. Seems fantasy Morathi trying to recreate a Narian with candidates like Malakathirian, perhaps warlike Alariel.
And that's an interesting take, Stephen. Basically, the idea that Morathi is looking to create the perfect elf leader to lead against, presumably, the destruction of the world. And yeah, you could argue that. I'm not entirely sure that's accurate, but you could definitely argue it. In fact, I think you could argue it's strong, particularly when you take a look at what her end times equivalent was. So yeah, we'll get to
her
some
end
of
times. No, it was a choice.
The end times is always a choice.
Thank you, Hawk, for being on approving comments, getting through the censors duty, because everyone's comments is going to get flagged.
Yep.
So thank you for that. Sean Schultz, Morathi even more powerful than Zinch because can make the authors do what she wants. Your favorite thing she has done.
I think I'd rather go through our stuff than start pulling out individual stories.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be a lot that we need to discuss concerning Morathi. It's going to go places.
Mine will come up quick. I'll put it that way. I'll put it that way. Okay, we're almost caught up here. Another issue that Morathi seems to share with Neferata, again on the surface, arguably two of the most well-established, ultra-powerful, evil-coded female characters both seem to have their motives largely tied to and influenced by men.
Yeah, I know. And it upsets me. I'm actually... The writing, though, I mean, I understand where it came from. It came from relatively blind writing by lots of men in the early 90s. But unlike some other characters, Morathi never really got her update. She just got re-pitched in exactly the same way again and again and again. And whilst that's really useful because it ensures that her character is consistent, it means that her character is often sublimated behind others in weird ways. But we'll get to that too.
21CS, howdy. Conspiracy theory. Morathi is the mortal...
This will be the last one.
Daughter of Slanesh, seeking godhood to usurp her mother/father. That's a fun conspiracy theory.
Hey, 21CS, yeah, I mean, it's as good as any other, because, hey, we do know that the gods did walk the earth during the Great War of Heavens, and who's to say that the gods didn't have kids in such a fashion? I mean, you could argue this. Why not?
True, and Morathi comes from that fun generation of elves where we have no idea who their parents are if you go beyond that point.
Alrighty, let's dive in. I'm going to keep the intro relatively short this time because we've got a lot to cover. And I know sometimes I've gone extensively into all of the background for the characters, but I think I'd rather let this stream speak for itself and the things we're going to discuss go into the great depth. But there is, as is often the case with these things, a beginning point. All of Warhammer has its genesis point, and Morathi's one was a relatively simple one, all the way back in the 4th edition of Warhammer. We discussed the 4th edition of LAWhammer a lot. LAWhammer! Warhammer! Too much LAWhammer in my brain. Warhammer. The 4th edition of Warhammer is the one that rebuilt all of Warhammer and consolidated it into the setting that we know and love today, which was then a foundation point that was built on later. And the High Elf Army List, all the way back in 1993, introduced us to the first Phoenix King of the High Elves. And the first Phoenix King of the High Elves had a second wife, Morathi. And the tale that they spun for this is pretty simple. She was clearly somewhat corrupted by chaos, and that corrupted an Aryan, right? And thus, the Dark Elves were formed from that, right? Yeah, let's go, woo! The story wasn't particularly in depth. And the Morathi tale was given a clear piece of messaging. And it was that she had been kidnapped by Slaanesh cultists or Slaanesh demons, depending upon which version of the tale you go with, and Inarian rescued her. And Inarian was besotted by her or bewitched by her, depending on which version of the legend you go with, and eventually marries Morathi. Morathi then has a kid not long after, Malekith / Malarian, and history of the whole Sundering and the Dark Elves and the High Elves and everything else is begun. The Dark Elf Army List came out the year after, I think, so we're probably talking, no, because it was later. It'll be about 1996. And 1996, so about 3 years later, the Dark Elf Army List comes out and we get ourselves some detail, including the unnatural relationship, which is an interesting way of putting it rather simply that Malekith, Malarian, and his mum were fucking. And that they were a long established relationship. And this is something that is going to cause a lot of people to go, you what now? Particularly if they read the modern versions where such language is kind of put by. But it's always been there, and it gets reinforced in several places. But be aware that at this standpoint, it is sort of a thing. And Morathi is given a bit more character, but not much. If we go with the 4th edition Dark Elf Army List, the Dark Elves is the story of Malekith. That's what the 4th edition Army List says. It's all Malekith was born, him, while simultaneously dropping a few lines that whisper this, that he got everything from his mum. Everything. And in the 4th edition Army List, we got our first character. Our first examination for Morathi. We got her stats. And she was marked as First Sorceress, exceedingly powerful, the founder of dark magic, pretty much. And that makes you go, wait, what? Right, okay, cool. She's also clearly marked as being influenced by chaos. And this is something that we're going to be discussing quite a lot through this, because what that influence is becomes very, very clear as we progress onwards. To begin with, we are writing Dark Elves in a period where there are no split mandala of elven gods. There is just Cain, some gods that the High Elves sort of worship, Kurnos, maybe, sort of mentioned here or there, Isha, kind of not mentioned. Cain, yeah, Cain's mentioned. He's all over the place. And we have a little bit of Hoeth because of the Sword Masters of Hoeth. He's there. And there's a few other gods, but the Greek pantheon doesn't exist yet. And the only thing that can be marked out as the deep, dark, seductive horror is Slaanesh. And she is encoded with being influenced by Slaanesh. We then spill through time. And I am going to go through this relatively quickly as we head over towards the 6th edition, because 5th edition skipped the Dark Elves. And the 6th edition Dark Elves gave us a repitch again of Morathi. Her magic items are updated. The magic items in the 4th edition were relatively bland ones, which were almost uplifts from other places. And she's codified in terms of who she is, the first Dark Elf Sorceress. She is the one that started it all off, the whole dark magic thing. The first sorceress. The first Hag Queen, very clearly marked in. She's got the original Cauldron of Blood, apparently gifted to her by Cain himself, so that she is perfectly beautiful forever. That sounds great. And it really upsets all those other Hag Sorceresses or Hag Queens et al. Who just aren't. She has this forever. She's stupendously powerful, stupendously old, and is the foundation of pretty much magic as we understand it with the Dark Elves, which is pretty cool. She's got her Dark Pegasus, named now Silhouette, as I recall. And in this version of her, we have a very clear little story at the end, which is pretty much her and Malekith having a chat. And basically the chat says this: "Hi, I'm Malekith. I do everything my mum says." And it ends with her saying, "Come to bed with me." And he goes, "All right, fair enough." And he takes off his mask, his helmet, in this story. And you see the scarred, broken, burnt face underneath and the long, white, flowing hair that he now has. This is in 6th edition. In 6th edition, we get a clear story of the relationship that Morathi and her son have. Her son, who is, without compare, the most important dark elf that there is, arguably one of the most important elves there is. And that relationship is one that is surprisingly and unexpectedly tender, as it is loosely put into place. This, of course, slowly changes as we move towards 7th edition. And 7th edition is a bit starker and moves away from the come here, son version, and far more of a combative version. It is Warhammer, after all. And again, in 7th edition, in the nice little write-up for her, they describe her as trucking with chaos. They describe her as dealing with chaos all the time. And this has been interpreted by most writers, and indeed those who even created the character, as she is a chaos character. And if we take a look at what happened in the Storm of Chaos, which was the Great Campaign, she led the Slaaneshi troops, effectively. She was at the forefront of the Slaanesh army and exactly what it was doing during that campaign. Eventually, we hit the most recent edition, which is 8th, which is really interesting. And I say most recent edition, we're not including the Old World because the Dark Elves aren't out in there yet. And here, the Chaos side of it is deeply, deeply erased. Almost. See, they don't get rid of the Chaos connection. What they do instead is they just don't mention it. And I'll give you a clean example. For example, there's a lovely section where they're discussing in 6th and 7th the attempt by the Dark Elves to destroy the great magic vortex of magic that sits over Ulthuan, because they intended to control all of chaos. That was their plan. It was crazy. And it was Morathi's plan. And in the 7th edition version, it clearly states that Malekith is filled with enormous power that he has secured from chaos, because he's a demonologist. He uses chaos against chaos. It clearly states it in black and white. Come 8th edition, they just get rid of all of the chaos is the source of power descriptions, but otherwise copy-paste everything else. So in 8th edition, they get rid of the idea that Malekith and Morathi are using the power of chaos to control chaos, and instead say their great sorcerers' covens are going to pull apart the vortex and then try to take control of chaos itself. But they get rid of the chaos descriptions in 8th edition, as in they're no longer saying they're using chaos against chaos. But in 8th edition, they continue to do it anyway, because later on, it quite clearly states, well, you know, Malekith was just as desperate as he was back during the Sundering, when it was all going wrong. So he turned to his great deals with chaos again and summons up a greater demon of Slaanesh. And he comes, Nakari arrives, and he's completely underneath the control of Malekith. So it's back in the 8th. And even in 8th edition, the idea of using chaos against chaos is pretty firmly put in place. So loosely, we have ourselves a bunch of books which say this: Morathi uses dark magic to control chaos, just like all wizards do, because all wizards are using chaos against chaos to a degree. But unlike all the other wizards, she's a demonologist. Dark magic is, after all, at its heart, about demonology, controlling demons. It's about using all of the winds and mulching them together for the most powerful effect. It's this hard, fast, exceedingly powerful type of magic. And it does use demons. It uses the spirits of the aether of one as being gentle, or it uses demons from the realms of chaos. And Morathi has been doing this almost since the beginning. And if it was just the army list we used, we would have ourselves a tale of what is effectively the high elves on one side spurning, using chaos against chaos, and the dark elves on the other side using chaos against chaos. And they both stand as different routes towards an end. But the 8th edition did a couple of other things as well. It mixed up what the Slaanesh influence on Morathi was, because originally the Slaanesh influence on Morathi and the pleasure cults that we'll be discussing were all Slaanesh. That's what they were. But later writing says no, that's not what the pleasure cults are. They're actually the Kyrathi. It's much more complicated than just Slaanesh. We'll be discussing that, I presume, at some point, assuming we get to there, because we have a lot to discuss.
I don't know if we're going to make it that far, but we'll try.
Yeah, we'll see. But the novels also do a whole bunch of other things, because they do something that changes Morathi completely. And it starts at the very beginning. Because in the novels, they have a nice little bit where they discuss where Morathi started. And her very first description in the 4th edition army list is a witch and a seer, because she saw the future and she was afraid of what it held. And they took that and ran with it. And they extended her background to pre-cataclysm. Pre-cataclysm. Right before it all goes boom. To the old ones. And the high elves, as they were at that point, before there was such a thing as high elves and dark elves, the initial elves, and she was, for those of you who know your Greek myths, somewhat of a Cassandra. She was a seer that nobody believed. So she made a plan, because she knew that chaos was coming. And this is a foundation of a character that will define Warhammer from that point onwards. And some writers believe that she is thoroughly in the thrall of chaos. And I am going to be blunt about that. We have had discussions with authors who say, no, she is entirely in the thrall of chaos. She is the problem. But if you look at the character and everything that she does, she isn't. It's much, much more complicated than simply that. She is powerful, manipulative, a user, but all of those things, the core descriptors that are used, are secondary to what she actually is, which is a seer. She knows the future. She understands what can and will happen. And it is her plans that define everything that happens with the elves from this point forwards. She makes, in many respects, Inarian the man that he becomes. She makes Malekith the man that he becomes because she's afraid of what the high elves are walking towards, because she sees the destruction of the world. And this isn't reading in between the lines. This is exactly what she says in multiple places. She is a complicated, deep, powerful character who you could argue is entirely in the thrall of chaos. But when you actually look at what the character does, what she does over time, and what she becomes, the answer is she just isn't. No matter what the authors believe who've written her, she just isn't. And I think that's going to be one of the many things that we discuss as we dive through the various iterations of Morathi. Because let's also be clear, for all the overall character has not fallen at all. In many respects, individual authors, as far as they're concerned, she has. And she hasn't just tipped over the edge, she has gone right over. And the descriptions that we get in the story in the 6th edition of the army lists of the Dark Elves, where Morathi is effectively going through all the different potential futures that lie before her and is being tempted by the demons that lie in the realm of chaos. According to them, she has indeed succumbed. But if we read the text they wrote, she hasn't. And that is a beautiful example of death of the author. And I am going to suggest that death of the author
Welcome to Lorebeards.
is a core component of understanding Morathi. Don't listen to what the authors say. Read what the text says. And by the end of this, depending on how far we get, I am quite hopeful that our reading of Morathi, which is going to go places, and be aware there are different versions of her, is going to be not only a character who hasn't fallen to chaos, but is arguably one of the only characters in the entire Warhammer world that truly understood what was going on.
I'm just saying, Age of Sigmar supports our argument. Anyway,
it does.
also great, because Ryan is my name, and I had it up there because we were chatting with someone, and I just left it up there. So don't be scared. My actual name is not Sotek, but I changed it back to make it easier for everyone.
Whoa, your name's not Sotek. Wait a minute. I have been
that's right.
laboring under a delusion these last few years. Sotek. Oh, I am appalled. All right, so let's dive into a few super chats before we go. We're going to start at the beginning. We're going to start somewhere else. What do you prefer?
Well, we're going to start at the beginning, and there's a reason to the madness. Scooby Bro 123, is the ancient city of Quintex actually relevant to Morathi, or is it just a starting place in Total War Warhammer? Technically, the second one, because we have no idea what's in the ancient city of Quintex. Total War Warhammer is the first time it's been expanded on, and it's added some fun little stuff, and it seems like a place Morathi would have likely been and gone, because it's an ancient city that has secrets, and she visits a lot of those. So her being there makes sense. And they were like, we don't want her right next to Malekith, so she's got to go somewhere, so they put her there, and it's fine. It's whatever. Yes. Brock, are there any other fictional characters with heavy Morathi vibes from like other settings? Ooh.
I'd say the closest that you're going to find there are the Melnibonians in Michael Moorcock's books. That's the closest.
If Cersei was a lot smarter, maybe.
But she's not. Cersei's not clever. No, not Cersei. Cersei is like a weak, rubbish version of her.
Yeah, I very much agree. Marsikowski, what if idea? What if the contract between the dwarves from the World's Edge Mountains and the predecessors of the Chaos Dwarves was reestablished in time? That is on the list. That is what we have on the list.
We have discussed that as a potential. One of the issues with that one is that it might not turn out all that much different for some parts of the world. It's not necessarily as big as it might appear to be.
Necromancer Kobold, how has her character survived the dreaded being a woman before the 2010s? I don't know if Britain had many problems with writing women versus the States.
Yeah, you're not wrong here, Necromancer Kobold. But fortunately, the way that she was written, particularly through the first, like the 4th edition, and the 6th edition version, was written vague, and she was completely secondary to Malekith and Anarion. The story was the story of Anarion on the High Elf side and the story of Malekith on the Dark Elf side, and they pretty much ignore her, other than just saying, oh, actually, she's her mum. Oh, actually, there's an unnatural relationship. Oh, actually, she was behind the pleasure cults. Oh, actually. So they give lots of little details in the army list, but they kind of avoid going into detail. Most of the extra detail comes later.
How long is a short Andy intro? 30 minutes or 1 hour?
It was exactly 15 minutes. I timed it. I was good.
He's got to have a clock in front of him. Darius Rose, despite the fact that we love men here, which female Warhammer character would you go on a date with or are infatuated with? Me? I don't know. Andra the Dread?
Andra the Dread.
That's like
Giant Dragon. Yeah, sure.
That's like an ant trying to date a dog. A big dog. Dude, I'm with
you do not want to go out with Morathi. Holy crap. She'd be the worst.
Morathi, no. No. That's not going to end well for anyone but her, and I like myself at least a little bit. Nyastra, man, I'm all in on Team Nyastra, even though she's only like, you might argue, half a person. But yeah, no, I'm up that creek.
Yeah, I don't know is my answer to this one. I'm just far too caught up in the world and all the individual characters because I play most of them as a GM, so it seems a little bit like self-loving.
If Lindsay's still in chat, ask Lindsay.
Yeah, ask her.
Pormesia, can we say confidently that Morathi is the oldest female individual in the Warhammer world? As far as I'm aware, there's no older female than her. As far
no. No, female. Okay, there's going to be some old dragon ogres. There's going to be some old dragons. There's going to be lots of ancient, massive megafauna that predates.
She's the oldest humanoid female.
Yeah, she's the oldest elf. I think we can say that pretty much. In fact, I think we can pretty much confidently say in the setting, she's the oldest elf.
Yes, she is the oldest.
She is the oldest elf. And if you want to go down the dwarfs and the rest, that's tougher because we've got several dwarf ancestor gods that were around pre-cataclysm, and some of those are still kind of around. So we can't say that she is the oldest definitely overall, but we can definitely say she's the oldest elf.
Yeah. And she's also, interestingly, the oldest, could technically be considered like mortal and would have been capable of dying of old age, kind of, sort of, maybe, but hasn't.
Yeah, because there's a couple of questions there, for example, about, say, Kalidor. For those of you who don't know, Kalidor sits at the center of the vortex of magic in Ulthuan, where he's perpetually dead, casting spells that go all wrong. In that the spells that he does ends him. And he's canonically, effectively almost dead. He also is young, really young by comparison, because they were trapped in time. Time broke with the great spell that they spoke. So Kalidor may come from the same era and may be older or younger, but in terms of his experienced age, he's a baby in comparison to Morathi, to the degree that when the Dark Elves and Kalidor go toe-to-toe and somehow Kalidor wins, you're left with going, why? And there's an obvious answer why, but why? Because Morathi by this point has got thousands of years of experience.
All right. Already did that one. Stephen Lucas, I said more about Alario's YouTube comments and this chat, but you guys floated the conspiracy idea in the Alario stream first. Oh, wow. Cool. Good for us.
Yes.
You assume I remember things I say. On this side, what bothers me the most with the Druchii/Acer reunion is if Dark Elves are corrupted, why would High Elves agree to a union? Wouldn't that corrupt High Elves? Dark Elves are not corrupted. And
that is a core component of understanding Dark Elves. They're not corrupted.
Not Chaos Elves. They're Dark Elves.
They're not Chaos Elves. They're Dark Elves. They're not Chaos Elves. It's not like Chaos Dwarves and Dwarfs. Chaos Dwarves are Chaos corrupted with a Chaos God. Dark Elves are just using a different set of gods to be the core component of what they style their life around. And the gods that the Dark Elves hold important are different to the gods that the High Elves hold important. But originally, the Elves held all of them as important. And they sundered into two, effectively, with one group favoring one set of gods, the other group favoring the other.
Yeah, the Dark Elves, it's really easy because of like how they look when you compare them to like a lot of the other Chaos races. They kind of look like they're in the same ballpark, but they are very, very distinct.
In fact, I think I can happily reinforce Dragon Magic's comment that he just dropped in. If Dark Elves are corrupted, High Elves are too. And that is correct, because both of them aren't really elves as they once were, although we all know that the Azrai are the most corrupted because they've effectively become weirdo spirit elves from the wood.
Yeah, because there are Chaos Elves out there. They're just relatively rare.
The Anointed, for example, freaking scary.
Yeah, and good old Takala, who's going to be coming to Total War very, very soon. 21 CS. So, do we know anything more of these background for an Aryan rescue, sir? Yes, we're going to start with that. So
we're going to be starting with that, so that's coming. And let's go do another couple of minutes worth of comments.
I'm going to do like 2 or 3 more. Brock 6000, as insanely powerful as Kalidor is, wouldn't Morathi, with all the magical innovations, demon packs, artifacts, eventually, etc., eventually surpass him? Yet it seems like he always one-ups her. Do elves have magic limits? Okay,
so the answer to this is it should be yes, surely. But the answer is also no, and there has to be a reason why. And this is something that the background currently lacks, because we have Kalidor and the great cabal of sorcerers around him effectively stuck in time, creating the vortex, and it's broken. And the Dark Elves on the outside have had a lot more time to master much more magic and understand how magic works far better than what they're doing. They do, however, have one card in their sleeve that's definite, and that's that they're in a time when magic is more powerful. because the vortex doesn't exist.
Kalidor,
so you could argue that does it, but Kalidor has to have another reason why he can somehow be better than mages that have been going for significantly longer than him.
Yeah, so from a out of universe perspective, I will give you the cheat answer, which is that a lot of authors are either told or just believe that Kalidor is just the strongest wizard in the setting, period. Like he's just the best. He's the best there ever will be and ever was, and he insta-curb stomps everybody. The more realistic answer is what Andy was saying that I would very much agree with, which is that he's basically standing on like a nuke. That he has a very unique position, which is that if you release him a little bit, even just the smallest amount from the vortex, you're basically dealing with a guy who's wielding a horrific amount of magic back when there was so much magic that gods could casually walk the world. And he's going to throw it at you.
And he's in a world where that magic is still going, and all the elves on the outside in the vortex world, particularly the dark elves who want access to that old magic, are stymied to agree. So I think we have ourselves enough justification there, but when we find out effectively what Morathi is as we head into the end times, and Morathi is so much more than just simply a wizard, that means Kalidor is almost certainly sitting in the same area, which means Kalidor is probably something a lot more powerful than the writers even realize.
Yeah. Okay, last one. Dadaman, tangential question. Why is the High Elf colony in Nagaroth called Arnheim? That name doesn't sound very elvish to me. It sounds Rickspielish.
Okay. That's because it's a typo. The original map had it as Arnhelm, Arnhelm. So it's Arnhelm, and Arnhelm was the High Elf colony over there. But it got typoed into Arnheim, particularly because everybody who was working around the maps was so caught up with their favorite little secret place, the Empire over in the old world, where everything's Heims and such like. They just presumed it was Heim. So Arnhelm became Arnheim. And Arnheim is now the name. And you're right, it makes zero sense.
Yep. So
it needs a good story to make sense. Right, you're going to start at the beginning.
Yes, we're going to start at the very beginning with Morathi, the Seer. So Morathi got a really, really cool little storyline. I would highly recommend it if you've never actually read through it. Tyrion Teclis book got a lot of really good stuff in it by Bill King, or Brilliant King. Dude wrote a lot of good stuff.
It was awesome.
So there is a whole prologue chapter to the second book where Morathi basically has a series of flashbacks while she's about to do some stuff, where she talks a lot about the pre-cataclysm, which was a very exciting thing because there's always been little notes about it.
Yeah.
But we never got an in-depth, because one of the things, like Andy said, is that Morathi getting the pre-cataclysm bump is a much bigger deal than a lot of people realize, because the cataclysm was not a short incident. This happens a lot where people will hear about the cataclysm and they think it happened and then it wrapped up in like 50 years. It lasted for centuries, multiple centuries. It took forever for the cataclysm to wrap up.
Yeah, and it gives you a clear timeline where Morathi's probably at least 10,000 years old, rather than the 7,000 that had been bandied around before that point. About 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, the Dark Elves became a thing. Another 1,000 years before that, there was other stuff happening. No, she goes back way further, because it's pre-cataclysm, before the Chaos Gods are even doing their thing.
Yeah, so we're dealing with someone that is super duper old. Now, there are a couple of little details that are included that I kind of like, okay, that probably shouldn't be in there, where you have mention of like the very first ever queen and like the old ones themselves. Probably not that, but we do know.
Why do we not need to mention it?
Oh, I find it silly that someone would be around for what I would call like the days of mystery. I like to leave those sort of weirdly out, because it also kind of implies that the first ever queen is what's her face, Anarian's wife, I'm not so keen on that either.
I don't think that was the bit, but nevertheless, the text is pretty explicit she was around during the old one's time.
Yeah, and I will double down by saying I think that's dumb. But anyway,
I don't think it's dumb because elves can do that. She's around it during the time when the gods are walking the world. I don't think it's dumb. I think it makes sense for the character, and in many respects makes sense for the decisions that she makes that leads towards Age of Sigmar as well, because she's much more aware of what gods are.
Yeah, I will move on from that topic because there's a lot of things I could say about why I deeply disagree with it and think it's a poor choice for the character, but I'm not going to worry about it because it's not important. So Morathi is, we don't know exactly when she's born, but it's implied that she's pretty young right before the cataclysm kicks off, because she has a whole mention that she's 11 years old when she has her first big vision, which is a cool year, but also doesn't really give us much frame of reference. But
yeah, 11 is an interesting age because that means tiny as elves go.
Yeah,
she's almost a baby.
Yeah, which does make sense for the way the story builds up, of that her visions are really unique, because the concept of seeing the future and prophecy and all of that stuff has existed in Warhammer. We know the old ones were messing around with it, of course, the Slaanesh had and things, but Morathi, uniquely among the elves, for reasons that are never super well delved into, but we can chat about a bit, sees the end of the world coming. She sees the cataclysm coming.
Yep.
Nobody else among the elves sees it. She gets a very genuinely special insight into the shattering of the gates, the coming of chaos, the arrival of the demons, and Morathi, and kind of like Katie says, there's this whole horrifying aspect of she is the prophet that sees everything that's going to happen, tries to warn everybody about what's going to happen, and nobody listens to her. She has this whole line about that she tries to warn everyone, she tries to manipulate people into doing something about it, she tries to seduce people into doing something about it, but despite everything that she tries to do, literally the moment she gets to the part where she's trying to get people to prepare for what's to come, and she mentions that there's an apocalypse coming, they basically do the equivalent, look at her and go, oh, you're fucking crazy, okay.
Yeah, and I think what we have here is different versions of the background are slightly conflict, because what we have is an era where we know the gods are walking amongst the elves. So this is a time when the gods are there, and you can get the clear reason for why she's not believed, because the gods are not in sync, they don't agree with her. The very gods themselves stand against her. She is, in many respects, a better understander of what's coming next than Morai Heg, the spinner of fate, herself, because she has seen something that no one else has. Morathi is uniquely special in a way that most other characters in Warhammer aren't, because generally when they get themselves this sort of ability, they are a prophet. I.e., they receive the word of a god who explains what's coming next. That's not the case for Morathi. She's a seer. She is somebody who has independently got the capability to see the threads that are ahead and understand them. And she saw more accurately than the gods themselves. And that is a super fascinating starting point. And in many respects will speak to what happens in the War of Heaven when the gods fracture, because everything that Morathi said was coming does indeed come. And the Chaos Gods and all of their whispers and everything that they were doing came as a surprise. It was a massive shock. Loads of elven gods died during this period because they didn't believe this could possibly occur. But Morathi was doing it. And there's one other, I think, important detail hinted at here that Sotek sort of skims over, and that's that Morathi really tries. We're not talking 5 years or 10 years worth of trying here. She, during this time, becomes a full adult and moves into a position of what is the equivalent of power in this early era of the elves in an attempt to try and persuade others to her way of thinking. And she tries lots of different paths. And elves don't do this in a matter of a year or two. Elves are long-lived relatively slow processing species in comparison to some others. Yes, they can move fast, but when they try something, they don't give up after 10 years or even 20. It suggests that she's been alive during this era for several centuries, as she's attempted one thing or another and effectively has become a pariah. Nobody believes her. Everyone thinks that the witch is insane and the witch is wrong. She is just wrong. That's pretty much the long and short of it. And again, for those of you looking for her origins, she's an Ulthuani elf. She comes from Ulthuan. Ulthuan is her home. It's very likely that she might come from Nagarath, because that's sort of hinted at later points and how much she fits in there, but it's never said explicitly that's the case. And I think it's probably better that it isn't. She is probably born somewhere. You're given no express parents. There's no definite she is this person or that person. What you can say for certain, though, is that she was young at one point. She remembers being young, and she got her visions early, really early. And they didn't come from the standard route that Warhammer uses for this, which is the gods, because the gods themselves denied her.
Yeah, and this is where she does something that I personally love, because it establishes her character in a really unique way, which, once again, she's not fallen. She's not. She just isn't. And Morathi, in some versions of the story, and my favorite version of the story, like Andy said, she goes through the ringer trying to save the elves from something they are completely unaware of and refusing to deal with. Because why, if someone is trying to convince you that you need to change your ways to prepare for a war, the likes of which is genuinely impossible to imagine, most people would look at that and go, we have literal gods, we live in a paradise, you're insane. There's no indication.
And the gods themselves are saying, shut up, we live in fantasy land, it's great here.
Yeah, so what Morathi does is that she, after trying to convince and seduce, and one of the things that's interesting about the seduction line is it's very much she is trying to manipulate people by putting herself on the line. She is doing acts that she might not want to do to try and convince people to do the right thing, genuinely. This isn't Morathi the evil trying to become blah, blah, blah. This is Morathi trying to save her people from extermination.
Yeah, so our core motivation right at the very beginning, which I just want to reinforce, is she wants to save the elves. And I think that's a lovely start.
Yeah. So what does she do? Because she could just despair and sit like a sad oracle of some horrible prophecy and just moan. No, she takes action. And what Morathi does is, if these gods and powers won't listen to her, she'll turn to ones that will. And Morathi starts to bargain with deep, dark, terrible powers. Not just the chaos powers. There are other things out there. And she starts reaching into these things of the ether, which we've talked about with like the dragon ogres and the Famir. Contact was being made, and Morathi makes contact.
It's just brilliant, because this is the day pre-Cataclysm that the divide between the gods is made. Morathi makes it between the Kadai and the Kairathai, as in those who take different routes towards their outcome, the heavenly gods and the underworld gods, who have got very different ideals and how the world should be expressed. And at this point, all the gods are in sympathy. The mandala's not broken. There is no sundering of dark elf and high elf. Morathi makes the choice on behalf of all of her people. And she makes the choice that if the world is going to fall to chaos and it's going to be destroyed by chaos, we have to use the only thing that can stop it, and that's chaos. She predates Hecate's choice to use and create and build dark magic. Now, if you don't know who Hecate is the dark elf god, and if you want to view it in such ways, the underworld god of dark magic. She's the great creator of dark magic, and she's doing it now. So Morathi predates Hecate's choice, because Hecate's choice to build dark magic was made during the Great War, when she realized she had to use the powers of chaos against the great enemy that was trying to destroy the world. Morathi did it first. She predates the gods' choices. And that is fascinating because it is now, this moment here, pre-Cataclysm, that the choice is made for the elves to effectively split. This is the point when Malekith was created. Way before the Cataclysm ever occurs. Because Morathi goes against everything her people teach. Everything. And says, no, Azurin and his great divine law for the world and how it's going to work is flawed. It's flawed. In this moment, Morathi creates the Kairathai without even realizing what she's doing. She is making deals with powers from beyond to increase her magic, so when the Cataclysm comes, she can do something about it. And in many respects, the great belief of what's going to come during the Cataclysm, which was Morathi was corrupted by Slaanesh, and those demons had corrupted her, and her first seeds of corruption happened at this point. No, as we're going to discuss, those demons were probably put there by her.
Yeah. Now, I want y'all to really keep this in mind, because we're going to come back to this in a little bit, of Morathi is taking an action that is going to change the gods. Like, she is not necessarily by intent, but she has done something that is going to cause the gods themselves to shift. Keep that in mind, because she's going to do it again. Like, another 2 or 3 times. But, so now, if you want to be unflattering to Morathi's tale, you could take the armchair view of, well, where did these visions come from? And did she fall for a ploy that was set in motion by something else? Did
by
she?
The dark gods.
Yeah. Did she widen a crack without realizing that's what she was doing?
That is the reading that is put in place by at least 1, 2, 3 authors that I'm aware of. I'm not going to name and shame anyone because it's not the right thing to do, although one of them was on Lorebeards, pretty much stating that as a fact in the past. But their view is that this is the point when Morathi falls to chaos, and in many respects, she is responsible for the fall of the elves and the split of the elves, which is all true. But it's all about, where does the agency lie? If we go with that interpretation, agency lies with the ruinous powers. Or the other side, which is agency lies with Morathi, seeing what the ruinous powers are going to do and making decisions in an attempt to stop them. Now, my view is that the agency with Morathi is the correct reading, and Let's Kill Those author, Roland Barthes' Death of the Author, very famous essay, famous essay, okay, applies here. The authors are wrong. The actual text is exceedingly clear. Morathi doesn't fall. She is constantly walking that line of potentially falling, but she does not fall.
Yeah, and I would very much argue that she did, in her own agency, she fulfilled her part of the great plan at this moment. Yeah. She did what she was supposed to do, according to other powers, not the chaos powers.
The old ones. Which is why I have no issue that the old ones are around at this point, and she's a core component of the old ones' plan.
That's a fair argument. I just don't like the idea that she saw any of them. That's where I
don't mind, because that can be just left behind authorial drapes. You don't need to actually tell the stories of those times. It can be nothing more than her memory. But they were real. They wandered the world.
Oh yeah,
they did stuff. So I have no problems. I don't mind characters being around at that era, because it's part of the established rules and the laws of the Warhammer world.
We don't have time for this. Anyway,
but you're right. We're still sitting pre-Cataclysm here, and we're already in the first hour already.
The Cataclysm happens. All right, the Cataclysm happens. Demons, horrors. Morathi, contrary to popular belief, does not just like pop out of existence and cease to exist for the next, like 700-ish years. She's fighting, and she fights bitterly. One of the things, there's a really nice quote from Bill King's writing where Morathi basically laments, in a sense, and she's old enough by the time the story is being written that it doesn't bother her as much anymore, but she used to rage about it, which is that the high elves, or the elves of the modern age, don't know what it was like to live during the Cataclysm, and don't know how horrible and awful and desperate it was. That Morathi was one of genuinely a handful of elves who basically had the equivalent of a gun when they were being swarmed by demons, and they could only be so many places at once. So Morathi is protecting who she can protect. She's killing the demons she can kill. And, maybe Kalur's over there with the dragons on one part of the island. And there's a couple of their gods are fighting in a couple of places. But the majority of regular people are being butchered.
Yeah, let's have a very quick summary of this time. And I do mean quick, to give you an idea of what's going on. We have several examples in the text in a variety of different editions where the elven gods are walking the world at this point. And because of the shaking of the world that the gods cause, all leave. Every single last one of them. They just go. But the actual stories behind that don't really matter. What's certain, though, is this is a thing. And the gods leave and are in a position where they're no longer capable of directly influencing the world and instead work through their mortal subjects. That much is certain. It's also a time when chaos is probably going to destroy everything. It's really looking bad for the world. And we discussed it in previous streams, but we're talking not just, there's demons all over the place. The sky is raining hell as bits of warpstone are just shattering through everything. The entire world is in a state of flux. It is a horrendous period. And Morathi is one of the core defenders of Ulthuan during this time. And she is not the woman she was pre-Cataclysm. Pre-Cataclysm, she was a seer, a desperate seer, who then makes pacts. She's on the other side of these pacts now. She has extraordinary power by this point. I would argue at this point, she is probably more powerful than any of the other elves. And it's sort of hidden in the text, but because of what the text offers, she has had centuries to master her arts, and she has had centuries to refine them, and she is not doing what the rest of the elves are doing, which is studying what lies before them. She's almost studying what lies ahead, and she is taking quick, fast, sharp routes to true power, the route of dark magic. And this is also the point when she and Hecate almost certainly become inseparable. The two become effectively one. Her choices mirror Hecate's choices, which is to create and use and refine dark magic, where Hecate does it on the divine level and she does it on the mortal level. And her power at this point is significant. And that can't be in any way underplayed. She is already the first sorceress and the first dark sorceress and the first truly powerful non-old one directly created thing, because she's drawing power from a completely different source. But I think it's again relatively important to note that when you write it out, reads like this. She's completely wrapped up with chaos. And it's true, because she is. And the first time that she meets her future husband-to-be, so when Anarian is in a state of despair and everything's going wrong, and it's all going terribly for the elves, and Morathi steps from behind the shadows for the first time into the history books and steps forward, is when she realizes the elves are going to die. And she takes over. And she does so by reinforcing the most important elf in the entire defense of the world, and that's Anarian. And steps forward, and the one part, by this point, she is I use the word inhuman. It's English. It's what we use. We are all humans. She is inhumanly beautiful by this point because of the pact she's made. She is everything that Anarian wants. And arguably, the first actual mistake happens at this point. Because when she steps forward, he falls in love.
There's an interesting thing here about Morathi says two things about Anarian in several texts that are really interesting. First, which we'll get to in a second, is that she's going to fall in love with him, which was not the plan. That was not her plan at all. She goofed. But the second thing is that Morathi says in different texts that one of the things that about Anarian that fascinated her is that in all of her visions and all of her seer prophecies, she never saw him. He doesn't show up. So, like, when she meets him, he's like a void in the future telling, which you could argue could probably have something to do with the fact that he has a literal god in his flesh. And like Andy said, she meets with him. It's because,
if you want it very simply marked in, Azuran made divine rules for the entirety of reality if you go with the elven myth, and Azuran broke one by effectively bringing himself back with Anarion, which meant that Anarion should have died that day when he was sitting on the top of his pyramid. If you don't know the story, very loosely, all the elves were screwed. And Anarion goes to the great shrine of Azurin and says, we're all going to die. Here's a bunch of offerings. Here's a bunch of sacrifices. Please help me, do whatever. And in the end, Azurin said no, because the future is fixed. Morai Heg's fate is certain. And then eventually he goes, nah, fuck it, and just sacrifices himself and walks into the flame. And like Azurin before him had done, he reincarnates from this flame with Azurin's power held within him, becoming arguably the first true avatar of the gods on the planet. And that is where his history is rewritten completely. And all of the seer power went up to that point and didn't see Azurin breaking his own rules. And he did. So it's a perfect little story. It makes complete sense. And Anarion is effectively the thing, the big, let's say, the big crowbar that can make the potential destruction of chaos happen and maybe the win against chaos occur. And that absolutely fascinates Morathi.
Yeah. So another thing to keep in mind this part, because remember that whole thing I said about how gods are changing because of Morathi's actions? We've talked about Hecate. And now that she has become the goddess of sorcery, she's become this goddess of dark magic. Well, there's a problem with Hecate and having her favor, which is that Hecate has a twin. She has a sister named Authority, the Lady of Desire. And Authority and Hecate, to put it bluntly, fucking hate each other. They are not close, and they're very jealous of one another. And Morathi understands the gods arguably better than any other elf in existence. And
agreed.
She knows that she has to keep them balanced. She can't just show a lot of favor and take a lot of knowledge and power from Hecate. She has to keep Authority balanced as well, because as we'll talk about a little bit later, we're not there yet. When you get out of balance with them, really bad things happen to you. Yeah. So she keeps balance with the Lady of Desire, which makes Morathi, beyond her natural beauty, which is intense, it's further magnified by the literal power of a goddess.
More than one.
More than one. This is the Morathi.
Because she also uses Slaanesh. Let's be exceedingly clear about that. Slaanesh is a tool in her toolbox. She uses the power of Slaanesh against Slaanesh. She is absolutely in no qualms about using demons, working with Slaanesh worshippers, doing whatever is required to get the win.
Yeah, so this is where she, even though we've already kind of spoiled that it accidentally backfires a little bit, she sets her trap for Anarion. Not trap in a sinister sense, but trap in a, just like she was before the Cataclysm, needing to do what needs to be done so the right thing gets done.
Absolutely. So let's be very clear. Morathi, right from the outset, has learned that she can't rely on other people to make good decisions because they're shit at it. And everything that she tried to tell them would occur, they didn't believe and occurred regardless. During the course of the Cataclysm, she has seen it go worse and worse and done everything in her power to try and hold off the worst attacks of Chaos and Ulthuan. And it's reaching the point now where she's also sort of despairing. But Anarion was an unread component in this. He was the one somehow dancing through all of the skeins of fate of Morai Heg that she didn't see. And she was like, we can use this. This is possibly the route through. But she doesn't do what your average person would do, which is, hey, Anarion, I know all this shit. Let me help you. No, she doesn't trust anyone. She's convinced that they won't believe her because she's like Cassandra. Go look up Cassandra. I don't want to go into detail about Cassandra, but she was basically a seer who no one believed. So she saw the future, but no one believed anything she said. It was a horrible place to be. And she's somewhat similar, but she's taken a very different route to Cassandra. Cassandra just sort of gave up and just couldn't do anything. Morathi made pacts, to become the most powerful creature that there was, and then proceeded to manipulate everyone towards what she believed was the correct end, which is ultimately stopping chaos destroying the world during the Cataclysm.
Yeah, so she organizes the best meet cute ever, which is that she gets captured by a bunch of Slaaneshi demons and things. And Anarion goes, oh, Chaos Army. And he runs down there on his dragon. He kills them all.
Yep.
And this is an Aryan in not a good place. This is an Aryan post. His wife is dead and his children are missing. He's already drawn the Sword of Cain at this point. This is an Aryan who is Ashuran and Cain stuffed into one body, and he's a mess. And he's super depresso and super angry. And when Morathi meets him, he saves her. And my favorite version of the story, which isn't the only version, but it's my favorite version, is that she tries to just seduce him with all of her beauty and yada yada, and Narian just doesn't care. It goes over his head. He just sees her as another elf. But then she can't kind of help herself because he sort of disarms her by not falling for it. She just talks to him, and she tells him about her prophecy. She tells him about her fears and what's coming, and Anarian believes her. He's the first person she's ever met who looks at her, hears everything she has to say, and he goes, everything you said has come to pass. I believe you.
Yeah, so she had her plan. Her plan was clear. Manipulate the fuck out of him. Because that's what she has done for the last so many centuries of her life. Because no one ever believes her. So she sets herself up in the most ridiculous situation, which right from the very first description, the 4th edition army lists, where it says she was amongst the Slaneshi demons, everyone's like, oh, that's when she was corrupted. And in almost every army list up to 7th after that, they say, and this is when the seeds of corruption were thrown through Morathi. Yeah, bullshit. She's been going back for centuries before that. And the whole thing is a setup to get Anarian. But Anarian doesn't do what she expects. And that is another clean example of why he is special. Super special to her, because he is a walking enigma. And for someone who sees the future and sees the absolute absurdity of what's to occur with chaos wiping out the world and is doing everything in her power to pick a path through that where the world doesn't go boom immediately, she finds something that not only believes her and listens to her, but wasn't what she expected. And that, for her, is astonishing.
Yep. All right, we're going to do some more super chats real quick, and then we'll carry on with Anarian and Morathi, which is genuinely a very heart-wrenching story.
It is.
Pormecia, considering power attracts her, will we say, she would be obsessed on you and Bo or one of the male Cathanian dragons if she saw one. Nope. They would be another piece they'd be another piece on the board.
Yeah, they're just, I would suggest when you look at Morathi, don't think of power as attracting her. Think of everything as a useful piece on a board. So, for example, that'd be like saying I'm playing chess and I'm attracted to the queen. No, I'm not attracted to the queen. It's the most powerful piece on the battlefield and the most useful. So I'm going to try and protect it and also use it in the best way that I possibly can, to use a chess analogy. And all of these are nothing more than pieces on the board to her.
It's all right. Dino Man. It's all right. His full name is Ryan Loremaster of Sotek. Yeah, that's on my birth certificate.
Exactly his real name.
So is Morathi not being followed a Lichpin idea that makes the story stronger? I would say it is compared to Neferata making a better elixir and Nagash claiming it, Linchpins being the only canon.
I think that it makes the story better if she hasn't fallen, but she is skirting that line all the time because she is using the power that ultimately corrupts all the time. And she is walking that fine line. And as we find out much later with Age of Sigmar, she pretty much falls on the not corrupted side. And I think that makes the story better from the outside right through to the end. But the uncertainty of it for herself as well, the fear that sits inside her heart that has she taken a step too far, makes the character stronger also. Doubt is a core component of it, and not being certain, because she is mortal. She doesn't have the certainty of an etheric entity, which is nothing more than pure purpose of a certain type. She's not a god. She is a mortal. And that means that she has all the failings of, that's going to come later. She has all the failings of a mortal and all the fears of a mortal that makes her a better overall character. And the idea that everyone else is convinced she's fallen, bar probably her son. Her son who sees her in some ways that no one else in the world does see her. because he has been there throughout everything, and she has taught him directly how to deal with the world. So I agree. This is a strong idea that just makes the story better.
I will note, though, that the canonicity of Morathi not being fallen is significantly more reinforced by the writing than like the Nephron or Elixir things, which makes is what it should be, but isn't what's put down on page.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one where you don't. The text is quite clear. She hasn't fallen. The authors, when they speak about their text, say, "Oh no, she's fallen," and then you look at the text and you go, "Nah, she hasn't."
Yeah, that's not what she wrote.
That's just not what is in there, and that's what I mean by death of the author and the ideas. And even when the author adds more words, it's just another text anyway. But yeah, go read Roland Barthes' Death of the Author if you want to have a description of what that all means.
Sir Benson, they said Michael Moorcock. Everyone take a shot.
Everyone take a shot. Yeah, quite.
Donoman, this what if won't be for a while since Skaven is this Wednesday, but what if Asvar Kul's forces managed to take Hellpit? That could be a fun one. He attacked Hellpit instead. Would have slowed his invasion down, that's for sure. Nystra, fun fact, without Morathi, there would be no dark magic. True. Or at least it would be very different. Without Dar magic, there would be no Druki magic users. Without Druki magic users, there'd be no necromancy because of the gash.
Yes. Morathi is responsible for Nagash.
Yeah. Oh,
directly.
Like,
directly. There would be no Nagash without her. There would be no split in the gods without her making the choices she made. There'd be no dark magic, as we understand, without the choices she made. She is a fundamental character to the cosmology of Warhammer.
Yeah, she is literally the first domino for several things.
Oh.
Limper 106. Pancreas don't work here in chat, but you never see a message from Win because he can only use one hand for the stream. Hey man, I also get turned on by lots of old men yapping about lore. Sarmelian idea. Kalador cheats. He learned Dragon's innate understanding of magic, so he instantly understood a lot of what Morathi tries to throw at him. There's an interesting take.
Kalador is without doubt an exceedingly talented individual who has advantages that are probably not the ones most people realize because of what he's doing and how important it is to the Old One's plans. The Ulthwani dragons, as they're often coined, are a core component of everything that's going to be happening later. And Kalador is the dragon tamer. He is the one that brings them underneath heel using a variety of different means. Meaning that he has been given advantages. And then when the cataclysm comes and it hits hard, we know that other advantages could potentially come as well. If we ever do a Kalador stream, I will hit you hard with all the crazy theories.
Yep. Darius, and Arian Vlad, and Shawn Michaels. Who are you? Marathi, Isabella, and Sunny. I'm here to fuck up your life worse than any drug addiction. And Tractor, Manfred, and me. No! Fire Snake, heavy off topic, wanted to post on Wednesday. I feel if we do another 40k versus fantasy, the Gene Stealer would be a nightmare for Skaven. Skaven already like to trade their own population as currency and don't mind mutation.
Gene Stealers would be a potential awful component in the Warhammer world.
Oh yeah. Tyranids would fit in smooth.
I've done it already in a Warhammer game and it was fun.
Damn it. I've just had a tinfoil hat idea for why Kalador managed to beat the Dark Elves. Morathi is a serious, so she could see that if they didn't do the ritual, they would lose, but if the ritual fully succeeded, chaos would be unleashed too early, so she secretly actually aided Kalador when he was temporarily freed, thus allowing the Dark Elves to escape at the first Black Arcs.
No, because Morathi was against the ritual from day one.
Yeah,
hard. And we'll get to that as we move into the future. She literally pleads with an Aryan not to go because she knows what's going to happen.
Yeah,
and we're not there yet. We will do, but she was hard against it. And there's an obvious reason why. For the very reason why Kalador is so fucking powerful in the center of the vortex whenever they tried to bring it down. Because magic was so much more powerful then.
Watchdog, what sets apart Morathi's spell proof? Do you mean like her spell proficiency? I assume. Strength, power. It's kind of everything. It's the matter of she's had like besides literal immortal borderline demigods like the Slann and the primordial creatures of the world. She's the oldest wizard out there. She
just is. What I find most interesting about Morathi is that she is one of those rare examples where Warhammer's rules never really kept up with what they were writing. there's a few of them. For example, Galrouch, whose stats are pathetic. Morathi is in kind of the same area. She is frankly bonkers, but she's also a character that started off not being that bonkers. So as they copy paste through the editions, she just gets slightly upgraded as they go, but the background behind her got deeper and deeper and deeper to the point where the character and the stats she was given, you're just left going, I think they might be a bit off.
Yeah, her like she actually funny enough, she's kind of better at like 8th edition. She got some kind of nice stuff, but her selection is really limited for some reason, which is weird.
It is
especially for 8th, because 8th like to throw around Loremaster. The fact she wasn't at least Loremaster of the lore that she picked is odd, but
it's very odd. I mean, she made the lore.
Yeah, tabletop is tabletop. What are you gonna do? Luigi Super, probably Andy would disagree, but to me, Morathi is an evil bitch, and I love her for that. Also, a bit such a crush for Tyrion.
So I am going to hard disagree with the idea that I would disagree. It's all about comparative morality. What is evil and what is good? From her perspective, everything that she's doing is good. She thinks she is doing what is ultimately the correct steps to get the outcome she wants. And sometimes, from an external perspective, as we look at it, it looks pure evil because she will do anything to get her win. And that is, in many respects, as evil as you possibly can get. She has no line of morals as we would understand them. Her outcome is all that matters. And that makes her as evil as they come by most moral standards. She is the worst. She created the Dark Elves, not Malekith. Malekith is the figurehead. She built them.
To be very frank about something very briefly, here on Lorebeards, we don't condone any of the actions of Warhammer Fantasy characters, and virtually all of them are raging assholes that are extremely evil and should be thrown in the deepest, darkest dungeon and kept away from any schools or places of innocent people. But we try and understand the characters and their motivations, especially from their own perspectives, and what's going on in the greater scheme of the world.
Mr. Mike, he's technically, I did disagree. Yeah, fair enough.
He did get you on a technicality.
Fair enough, Mr. Mike. I did disagree.
Yeah, but like I would say Morathi is undeniably evil, but it's not because she's like, oh, I'm so evil.
She's the best type of evil. She's evil in a way where she's the good guy as far as she's concerned. She is the good guy. And that just makes it better.
Yeah, and what's great is she's that kind of bad guy that when you sit down and really explain out her history and what she's trying to accomplish, many people will look at that and go, well, fuck, I can see where she's coming from. I don't like it, but I can see where she's coming from, which is excellent. Those are great villains.
I mean, she'd murder millions to get the outcome that she wanted.
Yeah. On the side, wait, if time isn't linear in the ether and the gods are etheric, how were they surprised? Was it because they walked the earth and were thus more material?
We need to have a discussion on this because our discussions around time and the aether always miss out one core component because we're often trying to make sure that we reinforce the idea that time doesn't really exist in the aether. Now, note what I said doesn't really exist. That does mean that it exists to a degree, and there's lots of examples where events come that are surprises, that are shocks, but they knew the event was going to be inhabited in some fashion. So I'll give you a single example. I'm a big, massive, dark, evil demon. Okay, I'm created because I ascend somewhere around about, say, the 2500. And I'm doing stuff back in the 1300s. Before the actual creation of that god, almost anything could have created that god. It needs to actually happen before it's consolidated, because time does sort of exist in the aether as well. It's what time when it catches up with the events will find a reason for everything that has occurred to occur, because it's weird. So why were they surprised? Because none of it was supposed to happen like this, and the Chaos Gods did their job. It's really complicated, but also really simple. And I've not disambiguated it very well, but we are going to have a discussion about this at some point, because there's lots of examples in the Warhammer world where entities do stuff before they're created to try and force themselves to be created, and it gets yanked away from them, and their creation comes from a different source. So this future is not certain. The events of the present are not certain. The things that happened in the past are the only things you can say with any degree of certainty. But even then, magic is influencing it because Shyish moves through the past and changes it. The reason that it's all a bit of a mess is because the material realm has magic in it now, which means that the cause and effect of reality is broken because of what the Chaos Gods did.
Yeah, maybe one day for like a bonus Wednesday stream or something, we'll do like a etheric time sit down chat and just really hash it out.
It's philosophical and deep and also surprisingly simple when you actually look at the core rules of it. But ultimately, it means that you can do a whole bunch of things as a writer. It's honestly, a lot of fun.
The further back you're looking at it from, the easier it is. And the more you try and actually apply it, the more you're going to hurt yourself. But Charles CK, if a seer, why not blind? Or is that only
because it's different. Morathi is different, right the way from top to bottom. You could argue it's because she's the first seer. That would be an argument. You could even argue that she effectively becomes the god of seers in some respects because she's the first. There's lots of arguments you could make, but the core seer blinded by the prophecies of the gods that come later is not happening here.
I have a theory. What if seers only are blind after the vortex and everything else is created? But seers before that worked.
There's lots of rules that you could create that would do that. That would be one example of them. Another one could be that the rest of them are getting their powers from a god and it's just too much. And it's doing something to them. So gods are impinging upon them. And she was not being impinged upon by a god. Something else was moving Morathi.
Yeah, Dynaman, we'll do 3 more and then we're going to carry on. Dynaman, I'm not sure if this could work, but could the split in the Elven God somehow have been caused by gods who believe Morathi and those who side with Ashurin, who said she was wrong, or did all the gods deny her?
To a degree, kinda yes. In that we know that a bunch of the gods sided with Azurin's law, and we also know that Azurin died. So that left the gods in a very weird place because the great divine creator got killed by Khorne. That's written in a couple of places. So Khorne has killed Azurin. So his laws no longer looked as immutable as they once did. And a bunch of gods went, fuck him and his laws, because that's clearly the case, our underworld gods. And a bunch of them followed, depending which book we go with, Tal, Kurnos, whatever. And they went, no, we're sticking with it. And we're effectively the Kadai, the heavenly gods. So we have a split, but it's also the split that Morathi herself had done centuries before. So in many respects, she was the one that's kicked off that ball and started it going off. But the gods, in many respects, were responding to her mindset rather than the other way around.
Prometheus, why is her relationship with Hellbrand not good?
Because it benefits Morathi. Yeah, it's actually written very clearly in text in multiple places that Morathi benefits from Hellebron constantly fighting against her. So she keeps her in place where she's constantly struggling to ensure that she's the best she possibly can be for the Dark Elves. Yeah,
they genuinely have a extremely funny relationship. If we have time to get to it today, we'll talk about it. That might very well be in the next stream, though. Prometheus, is not Morathi... is Morathi not killing Alisara a contradiction to her behavior? Was she not always the mother who always wanted her son to be at peace after all the pain he faced? No, that's never what she wanted.
Malekith is like everyone else, a tool. Yeah. Malarian is a tool. The Dark Elves are her creation. Do not be under any assumption that this is Malekith's creation. She made Malekith. Malekith is a tool. Malekith as a tool was weakening. He was, there's a lovely long section about how he was getting almost fed up. Ennui was setting in. He was not being the man he was going to, that she needed him to be, which was effectively an Aryan reborn. He wasn't doing what needed to be done. And Alisara, as far as she was concerned, would completely break him and almost turn him back to the potential high elf that he might once have been. That was not what she needed. So yes, she had to be removed.
Yeah. Morathi undeniably loves her son, but she has a very specific role she needs and wants him to fulfill. And she's going to make damn sure he does it.
Yep, absolutely. She is as manipulative as they come.
Skylar Martin, was Morathi becoming a god in AOS almost a fixed choice because she has proven in her own mind that she's better than the gods at protecting the elves? So I wouldn't say a fixed choice because the Warhammer world's kind of weird, and if you try and imply there's like only a straightforward destiny, it fucks everything up really carefully. But it is a storyline that was set down with her a very long time ago, and AOS brought it to a very satisfying, natural conclusion.
Morathi was one of the good choices that Age of Sigmar made in terms of their god choices. I would argue some of them were really weak and they were just made because they were there. Morathi, however, spot on.
Yeah. And frankly, you could tell she was one of the really good choices because instead of just doing it at the start, they let it be a storyline that built up over the course of 2 editions, and it was so good when it paid off. Okay, last one, and then we got to get back to stuff. Muckafellow, is there a relationship between the innately magical nature of elves and their intense emotions? If so, would a powerful sorceress like Morathi have more or less self-control than the average elf?
That is a complicated question to answer in short order because we have a lot to cover, but loosely it is all tied together. It's one of the reasons why they are so innately magical is because they are so emotional. It's one of the core components of how they can manipulate the aether with greater ease than others can. And they can also manipulate it in a way that other species kind of can't because they are intensely connected to the other side with their soul, where most wizards in the Warhammer world are only influencing the material realm. That's it. They are dealing with the winds of magic and nothing more, where elves are bigger than that, and their deep emotional connection makes them exceedingly powerful in a way that other species kinda aren't. More so in some respects than, say, the Slann, who are purposefully non-emotional and are using different types of magic. They have potentially the access to be much more powerful and to become gods because of the way they interact with the aether. Morathi's outcome in the Age of Sigmar, when she becomes a god, is a natural evolution of who she is and the character she had and the extraordinary power that her soul would have accumulated over time and the understanding of how to get more power into it. She manipulates and understands soul stuff in a way that most other species don't.
Okay, I lied. I'm going to do one more. Okay, so the first I've always heard of Morathi are either Morathi being corrupted manipulator or her just showing up falling madly in love with an Aryan. This version where she was obsessed with saying for people and them not believing her and causing her to fall into by any means necessary, then her obsession being simultaneously disarmed and validated. It's a much more interesting character. Yeah.
And it's the character that is actually in the text. That's the best bit about this one. This isn't us making shit up and saying this makes for a better outcome.
This is why you don't read the wiki.
Yeah, totally. The wiki is just weird in some of the conclusions it makes.
Know what books to buy.
Yeah, it's the text is pretty clear on this. This is not a character assassination that we're making here and saying, yeah, all of these things happen, and to make it make sense, we have to kill the character they've made to make a new one to make it all make sense. No, the opposite is the case. Her character is exceedingly clearly defined, and in many respects, the biggest problem that she had, as we're about to move on to, because it is the perfect segue as we move from one to the next.
That's why I did one more.
Yeah, it was a perfect. I see why you did it. Is because she falls in love.
So, Morathi and an Aryan. We've talked about this before on Lorebeards, so I'm gonna try to kind of get through it, but it's important to focus on it. We've talked about it from an Aryan's perspective, but it's really important to talk about it from Morathi's perspective. Which I think we did actually way back in the Malekith stream, but that was 1,000 years ago, and frankly, we probably need to do another one.
Yeah.
So
up to date.
Yeah. Morathi falls in love with an Aryan. And one of the things to keep in mind with her and Aryan's relationship is that by elf standards, even by, in some ways, human standards, but especially by elf standards, this relationship is fast. It is like super fucking fast. They meet. They get together within, I think, like a year, and then she's only with him for like 40 years before he dies.
Yeah.
Which for an elf, that's less than a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Like it is,
yeah.
It's she loved him so much, and when they get together, Anarian marries Morathi and he takes her back to his court in Anlek. And Morathi immediately takes over, not in like a hostile sense, but in that her people come to love her. Morathi was not feared in the way that she'll come to be. She was genuinely beloved by the people of Nagaryth and many people outside of Nagaryth. she was genuinely a very beloved queen after the heartbreak of the Everqueen died. Because remember, there's no Everqueen. There's no like replacement. The Everqueen is dead. The office, the hope of the elves is dead. Morathi is stepping into a void, a pit of despair and hopelessness, and she's got to revitalize the elven people.
Yeah, I've got two things that I'm going to say on this one. First, the love. Let's simplify it so that we get it. This is a common trope in a lot of fiction where somebody meets someone that isn't like everybody else and kind of falls for them. Whether it's, we've got one sitting there, Bella to Morathi's Edward. I would instead say for a different vampire one, instead turn over to True Blood and Suki Stackhouse, if you know that background, because she meets for the first time someone that she can't read the mind of. And for her, the blessed silence is beloved, and she very quickly falls for him. Morathi's the same. She has met someone that she can't predict. An unpredictable, uncertain spear, lance of hope in the certainty that she is afflicted with as a seer. An Aryan is different. And he is all of everything she ever hoped for in a single elf. Because he not only cannot be read by her, but even more importantly, is so fucking powerful, he can make not just a bit of a difference, he can make an enormous difference. So you can see the classic trope here of the person who falls in love with the other person who offers something they can't get any other way. It's kind of awesome.
A little bit. Ooh, yeah. I wonder why. But
okay,
anyway,
yeah, quite. So that's one. And the second point I want to make is a little bit more about Morathi and her beloved nature. That kind of falls apart in relatively short order, but only from certain quarters. She's beloved by the people that she's surrounded by in her court, and she uses everything that she has learned over her previous centuries and possibly even 1,000 years or so. And Arian's basically a baby in comparison to her. All of that to control the court because it's a tool. So she effectively becomes the queen. And she very much focuses on what would be seen as the underworld gods, the Kairathai type gods. She's using particularly the teachings of Hecate and Authority, those two core goddesses with the dark magics, and on the flip side, the I can't help myself. Unless you're reading something else. On the flip side,
I was reading the Cradle Snatcher. It's elves. That's just
it's elves. It doesn't matter. Age is weird for elves anyway. So using authority and the strong use of the deep, desirous nature of the elves to help manipulate them. The court becomes, as far as the other courts are concerned, different. And many of the other courts, particularly the powerful ones like Calador Dragon Tamer's court, fucking hate it, particularly because she, the witch, and they often describe her in the text as the witch, occasionally the seer, but the witch. She is bringing a very different, let's say, way of resolving things than they prefer. They're looking to try and remove magic from the world, and as time goes on, she agitates against that hard. And an Aryan moves from being someone who had his own mind to doing pretty much anything she said.
Yeah, there is literal lines in the text that's very funny that an Aryan literally just does whatever she tells him to. Like, always.
Yeah.
Except for one time, which we'll get into in a second.
Once, and then the time that he didn't do what she says, as we're about to go on to, doesn't turn out so well for him. She effectively becomes not just the power behind the throne of the Nagarai court, but the power behind the elves, and a bunch of elves really don't like it, because what she espouses as an answer is, ultimately, we have to use chaos. That's what she represents. The gods and chaos must be on our side. And they come to the conclusion that the demons were getting more powerful, stronger, more controlled, and they were going to overwhelm Ulthuan. And that overwhelming path was happening. Parts of Ulthuan were falling. They did not agree with both Anarian and Morathi. Morathi and Anarian's plan was super clear. Use chaos against chaos. I'm a fucking god. I'll take them on in their own terms. Where the elves outside the court started coming up with a different plan. And that meant they were the rebels. Let's be very clear about it. In terms of what this means, the court, the leading court of the elves said, we can win this. And Kalidor and his ilk, who hated that message, said, yeah, no, we think you can't. And they just went ahead with their plan without any permission. They just did it.
Yeah. So one last thing, which we've touched on before, but I want to reiterate because this is Morathi's video and we're talking about Morathi, is that as far as Morathi's relationship with Anarian, despite the fact that she wielded a lot of the political power, it's a tragic romance of that Anarian at this point just wasn't really capable of loving anyone.
No, he's not human anymore.
Yeah, he's got two gods in his body, and he is really fucked up in a lot of different ways.
I mean, arguably 3 gods in him, if you consider what that sword was probably made by. So at this point, an Anarian has been effectively possessed. He becomes the first avatar of a god in the Warhammer world that we are aware of, as he becomes the avatar of Azurin. And Azurin empowers him to, like a god, walk on the planet, but as a mortal. So not breaking the gods cannot come back to the material realm rule, but at the same time, kind of circumventing it in a sort of weak way, but also opening a door that other gods could do this. And other gods are soon going to do this when they start effectively manifesting within mortals, but by mortals, I mean elves. And they manifest within elves during the end of the Cataclysm and again later in a variety of different ways. And Anarian has Azurin. He's wielding the sword of a god that carries a curse on it from probably Vol. So he's got all of that curse running through him, all of Cain's power running through him, the power that was made for Cain with that blade, that was made by Vol, who was effectively his pet little creator that he chained to his anvil. And also, interestingly, a god that was from Kalidor, because that's where his Vol is. So you can already see the Cain angle and how much that would fall out with the Kalidorian elves, because Vol was very much a god from that area. So you can already see the Kadai and the Kairothri split it being made manifest. Anarian wasn't on the Kadai side. He's the first Phoenix King. And if he was to look back from, say, the end times and look back, he would not say, I was a Kadai Phoenix King. I am not a high elf. If anything, he's much more like a dark elf. He is, in fact, arguably one of the first dark elves. Very, very clearly.
Oh, yeah,
and that breaks Morathi in a way that she never intended or wanted, because ultimately she was looking to use him as a tool. She falls in love. Anarian can't love back, particularly because not only is he possessed by multiple gods, a killing machine that has moved beyond simple understandings of, yeah, I love you, you're all right, hun. But beyond that, Morathi sucks. Okay, she is beautiful to everyone else, and she puts on the face for everyone. But underneath it all, he knows who Morathi is, and she is a manipulative user who would see thousands die just so Anarian would succeed one step. Just one step. She would see millions die for him to succeed another step, because he was the unpredictable part of the entire puzzle. He was the only chance that she saw towards success, and she loved him. And he, upon seeing what she was, couldn't love him back. Poor old Morathi was in a really bad place.
Yeah. And there's also the notes, like there are notes, especially if you look at some of the darker takes of their conversation they're about to have, where it's some authors have thrown in the idea that Anarian is physically abusive to Morathi as well.
Yeah.
That he would have these wild mood swings where sometimes he was more standoffish and cold, and other times he would get mad. And when he got mad, he would literally beat her.
Yep. And this is a grim period, and she'll take that. In some respects, and as dark as it may sound, in some respects, she might even promote it. Because she wants Anarian to be a tool that destroys chaos. And if that involves him having massive anger and the absolute pinnacle of everything that is a killer on the elf side, she'll do it. She'll suffer it. She'll take it. She'll take anything to get the win. And it's horrible because not only will she do that, it will also break her heart because she realizes that every time she does, she's driving the man that she loves further away from her.
Yeah. So this leads to the pivotal moment where they've had Malekith. Malekith is like in his 30s, which for an elf is still a baby. And like they've been teaching him and stuff, but a moment comes where Anarion is preparing for a really big fight against this titanic demon army. And Morathi's with him, and they're discussing what they're going to do and how they're going to, frankly, win this part of the fight. But how are they going to like go and deal with the other areas? And
win the battle, but not the war.
Yeah, and word shows up that Kalidor has started the ritual.
Yep.
That he was explicitly forbidden by the Phoenix King not to do.
Yeah, they have a conversation about it. They actually have a conversation. So before the big battle comes, they have a conversation, and Anarion goes, "Don't do it." And the Everqueen goes, "Maybe we should." Not the Everqueen, pardon me. He's the Everqueen, Kalidor, pardon me, says, "Well, yeah, okay, I won't." And off he goes, and he does it anyway.
Yeah, and this leads to, I believe you can find it. I want to say it's either in the War of Vengeance trilogy or if it's in the audio drama about Anarion. But anyway, so Morathi has a full-on chat with Anarion where she begs him not to go. And she throws everything she has at him. She tries to like be like, I could turn you into like a genuine god. We could just bind all these demons. We could become immortal and live together forever. We could like all these things. We could reshape reality, all these things. And Anarion just keeps telling her, no, 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 no. And she finally tries the, I love you and I don't want to lose you. Like we have a son, don't do this. And Anarion looks at her and for the first time in their relationship, he goes, no.
No. In many respects, she is a victim of her own success. She has created an exceedingly powerful, self-determined king who is no longer despairing, who has no longer reached a point where he feels that there is no potential outcome where he can win. He had, before he met her, almost become an automaton. And she had moved him from that. But equally, she had given him, you could argue from her perspective, too much self-control. She had told him too much. He knew that he could help and stop. And in some respects, let's be blunt, he didn't like what Morathi was offering.
Also,
because
fun fact.
We
talked about earlier how Morathi couldn't see the future with Anarion. This is the one time she can because she sees he's going to die.
Yeah. So she knows that there is no outcome with a vortex where Anarion won't die because all of his power is interlaced with what the vortex does. It doesn't require even a seer. It's basic logic. He will die when that vortex goes up because everything that he is interlaced with the giant world of magic. The world of magic that Kalidor keeps, by the way, when he's sitting inside that vortex. You know, he came out all right in this one. And it will absolutely disempower her. It will disempower Anarion. It will disempower the elves. And she believes that the elves can beat chaos by effectively becoming gods. It's what she offers. The very story that's getting set up for Age of Sigmar, she's nailing now. And she's saying, we are going to take them on their own terms. Chaos gods are nothing to us. I have been using them for centuries, bleeding their power. And I'm not only going to bleed their power, we are going to beat them. We will become more than them, and we will live for eternity as husband and wife. And it will never end. And he was afraid. He didn't like what she was offering because he could see her for what she was, someone who would do anything to get the end she wants. She is ultimately, by most moral standards, evil as fuck in terms of what she's willing to do to get the best outcome. And he goes, no, I think I actually prefer this one, and denies her. Bummer.
Yep. And that's the end of Anarion. Anarion goes off.
So, I think it's worth just quickly describing this one. Anarion goes off, The vortex goes up and he dies. Let's be as clean as we can be about that. Everything she expected to occur did. And she is left distraught and is also left with this little burning idea at the back of her head. All we've done is delay. We haven't stopped the Chaos Gods. All we've done is delay their ability to affect the material realm. We have to be better and bigger than them. We have to become gods. Only the elves, in truth, can do this, in her view. We have to do better, and we can't. Fuck, we're screwed. And she is now a minnow in comparison to the power that she had before. She has become a much smaller version of herself because magic no longer floods the world, the very magic that she was using to do everything, which means, if anything, she has to turn darker. She has to go towards harder, darker magics to use more chaos to get more power. Bummer.
Yep. All right, super chats.
Bummer.
Taylor Martin, Malekith, it's not the proper way. Morathi in the voice of the Emperor from the Star Wars. Do it. Do it. Do it. She actually does that at least once. Much more than once, actually. Scott Thing, I believe Quintex might be tied related to the passage on page 161 of the Tome of Corruption about Morathi's plans to raid Lustria for Old One artifacts. Oh, cool. I mean, check that out later.
I mean, you could definitely argue that.
Yeah, I don't remember Quintex being mentioned, but I will double check that because we're definitely not going to make it to that part of the story in the stream. So get ready for Morathi Part 2 Electric Boogaloo next week. From Eggman, I think the best way to put it with the Ether in Time is there are caused causes. Unless it was there from the start, it has a place in time. For example, Skulltaker was once a mortal, then a demon.
You kind of almost on it. There are things that have happened, but how they happen is not certain until they do happen.
Yep. Wrap yourself around that. Boogeyman, yep. I was watching the Chaos Gods tier list. I think Malal should be used as god whose name is unknown or can't be shared by any who is blessed with knowing the name. The whole we can't use his name thing would be a fun meta reference, and they could keep a popular Chaos God around. That would be a good way to deal with it.
That would be quite funny.
Skywag 11. When did Morathi marry Cain? During the War in Heaven? Okay, so we're not there yet. We're not there. We're almost there. We're really, really close. Hang in there just a little bit longer. Hang in there. We will get there this stream. Just hold on a little bit longer. Cole Patterson, off topic. I asked Andy for some tips on making a villainous winter goddess yesterday, and he sent me to get Mother Horfrost, which is great.
Did you not have it already? Oh my God. I actually thought you were asking a question just so I could mention more than Horfrost because we literally had.
You weren't setting him up for a layup?
That was brilliant. So, Cole, I'm delighted that you found it. And anyone else out there, I strongly recommend going over to drivethroughrpg.com and buying a copy of Mother Horfrost because, well, I wrote it and I think it's great.
Can others use chaos without corruption too? Or is it elf bullshit? Technically, every single wizard is using chaos without necessarily chaos corrupting, depending on how you look at it.
It is to a degree elf bullshit because we've got examples of corrupted elves and how they fall. And it's very different to how humans fall, for example. Humans just sort of do it. They trip and they've fallen. Where elves, it always seems to be a concerted choice. They decide when they fall. That's why they have to be tempted. And that's why they have to be tempted into making a choice that they shouldn't make. You see this again and again when the elves are discussing, oh, that almost happened. That's one of the reasons why they anointed, and we're not discussing that this stream, but they are something that's tied to Morathi later on, perhaps. The anointed, which are fallen elves to Slaanesh, are so super weird and so super powerful as well.
Yeah, that being said, if you're talking about like using dark magic or demonology, that's elf bullshit. If anyone else tried to do that, they're going to get corruption from it.
Yeah, because elves don't mutate. That's one of the big things.
Elves have a cheat code.
They have a cheat code. So, well, everyone else, when they're using dark magic, gets really weird. Elves tend not to. But I will say that earlier versions of the elves did. So if we go back to the 4th edition of Warhammer, when they discuss Malekith there, they say that Malekith, when he was studying dark magics from his mother, right, in his very early years, started to become more withdrawn. His hair got darker, his skin got more pallid, and that became a dark elf template that came later. As that moved through the editions, it got dropped, and elves not mutating became a core component of how they could succeed with dark magic where others simply couldn't.
Cameo, would you backport Shigaroth and Yniad into Fantasy or AOS? Why not? I would not, because I think we have a good amount of elf gods now. I would just want to expand on the ones we have, because we've got 22 at least. We've got a bunch.
I can kick that's basically Loic anyway.
Yeah. You don't.
We already have the god there. Iniad, I think, is a 40k thing. I'd like to keep it over there because I think it makes more sense there. There is definitely something you could use that was similar in Warhammer, particularly when you take a look at all of the waystones and the souls that have collected in them, and what that could be used and how that could be developed within the lore. But nothing really came of it, so I'm quite happy with nothing going on it.
I feel like Yniad is a really nice consequence to the Eldar storyline and like the whole birth of Slanesh and all that crazy shit, which just isn't a thing in fantasy. Dino Man, Morathi having fought by any means for centuries, seeing Anarian having sacrificed himself and pull a cursed sword that curses bloodline for eternity. This guy gets it. Yeah, that's very true.
The fact that she didn't know any of that was going to happen and it was succeeding was much more important than the actual events themselves. The fact that he did some things that were truly awful in terms of what elves would expect. Don't draw the sword of Cain, it's terrible. Is almost secondary to the fact that Morathi couldn't see who was going to do it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm almost caught up, which is strange. Unexpected. Because I definitely saw there's one that just didn't show up on here, which is very weird. Because I know I saw it, and I'm going to find it. Hold on, there it is. I don't know why this one didn't show up. Crusader King, thank you very much. Mommy Morathi, sorry, had to. Love your videos, watching them all. This is the first I've made it live. Well, welcome, and thank you so much. I don't know why it didn't show up in my usual thing. I was like, I saw a pink one. I don't know why it's not on there. My personal favorite was the Brass Citadel. That was a really good one. I play a Khornate Chaos Army in 40k AOS and Warhammer Fantasy Battle. More chaos, please. Painting a chaos chariot right now. Well, awesome, and thank you so much. And more chaos will be coming soon. Don't you worry, my dude.
There's always going to be more chaos.
Pormesia, then why Malekith didn't do anything in that regard? Did everything he done had failed by his mother, or he couldn't have harmed his mother?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking there.
I'm not Feel free to elaborate. So I'll just give a broad thing. Malekith often agrees with his mother. There have been times where they've disagreed, and there was even a time he almost killed her. But they tend to end up agreeing with one another in the long term because he understands his mother well. But they do have fights and disagreements. And only once has Malekith tried to kill her and really got close, but ultimately didn't. Which we're almost to that part of the story.
Yeah, we're going to be getting to that.
Okay, I'm going to do these last two, and then we'll go.
Okay, I'm going to quickly be back in a moment.
Okay, that makes my life easy. Donovan, do you think that if the ritual hadn't occurred, Morathi's plan could have worked? Also, did you get my super chat about Dark Elf characters with armor? No, I didn't. Feel free to Donovan to just repost exactly what you said about it. Like, just copy paste it. You don't need to do the bits, and I'll just grab it out of the regular chat. But I will be blunt and tell you that I think it could have worked in a fashion. I believe Morathi could have successfully pulled off something that would have allowed her and Anarian and a select group to survive, basically the end of the world, and to like go into the ether and, carry on within the ether and what comes after. But they wouldn't have been able to save the world in any meaningful way. Like the Warhammer world would have been doomed, I think. And you could also argue that Morathi was just arrogant. And even if she had been able to pull off her whole scheme, it had a lot to do with her love for Anarian blinding her. And she was starting to perhaps make small mistakes here and there, and was ultimately setting herself up for she would eventually die. But she seemed pretty confident. Or you could argue she seemed pretty desperate. So, Omnicide, running out of super chats, unacceptable. More money for the Lorebeards. Is marrying Cain like getting 50% of her husband back? We're almost there. Stay tuned. Because that's where we're going right now. So, the vortex has happened. Anarian has fallen.
Mm-hmm.
The elves, a bunch of horrible storms and crazy shit happens with the creation of the vortex. But the world calms down. The calm after the storm has finally arrived, and pretty quickly afterwards. Donovan, I've started, so don't worry, I'll get it after we get to the next stop point. With the calm that happens, a couple of years, not too long passes, and the elves, the various surviving princes and princesses, though they usually just like to say princes, but there would have been princesses there too, gather up to basically have a big meeting to go, well, now what? And they have a big discussion where Morathi is there and participates very, very heavily. Yep. And she very much manages to very cleverly convince them all that, well, they should continue the line of the Phoenix King. Because there is no Everqueen. And the Everqueen basically gets rediscovered right around this point. So the kiddos are returned. And when they're having this meeting, word literally arrives. Like the kids basically show up during this meeting. And there's a whole thing about it. And Morathi is not super happy because the Everqueen represents a very unique political threat to a lot of what she's built up.
Divine threat.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
And so big meetings had, and basically after a lot of back and forthing, there is, amusingly enough, some opinions voiced by some of the princes that, oh, well, we could solve this easily. The Everqueen, Yvraine, should simply marry Malekith, and that'll solve the problem. Yvraine refuses, which is a little awkward for a lot of people involved, but she's like, that's my half-brother. I'm not interested. No, thank you. And everyone goes, okay, fair. And they debate for a while. And bless you. This builds up to them taking a vote. And the princes all vote, and after a bunch of debating, they ultimately, very heavily swayed by Kalidor's son, decide to vote against Morathi and pick Belshazzar as the second Phoenix King rather than Malekith, which Malekith accepts with grace. Morathi, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, this is quite an interesting period. Because we are post-Cataclysm and the world has changed. And I mean, it is abruptly changed. Not just months and a few years before, the world was full of demons and corrupted and awfulness. And the demons have almost instantaneously been wiped out across the planet. And all of the support that they were providing for the...
That's a very good comment. I bet she gets enraged while being ignored and dismissed again.
Yeah. And this is seen as a great success by the elves. They see the success of Kalidor's plan as good. Morathi still disagrees, and she's also grieving the man she loves. But regardless, she goes, fair enough. I am now going to engage with all of you, and does. And she does it very well. And this is something that's often forgotten, that she turns very quickly to be the person that she needs to be to get what she wants. But everyone knows exactly who she is. She's the witch that made Anarian do crazy stuff that they didn't like. And she's the witch that thought that the Kalidorian plan was wrong. It's no surprise that she did not win the day politically come the end. But it's interesting because it looks like she would have if it hadn't been for the imposition of the two kids from the previous marriage arriving back and effectively bringing back the Everqueen's line again.
Some divine intervention, one might say.
Exactly. Completely undermining everything that she wanted to see as an outcome. She still, at the back of her head, thinks the vortex is wrong. Just wrong. She thinks that it's in place now, though, so we're going to have to live with this and prepare for the next major incursion of chaos, because it's going to come, and they're not going to have their magic ready for it, because magic's been drained, and it's now become weird. If we go with the old world version, this is when the colors of magic as we understand them in the modern setting very much reinstate themselves as weaker versions of what used to be there before. All of those colors were there before because we've got examples where they were, but we also have examples of them threading out and being born at this point too. We've got a different magical world. It doesn't matter what the details are. It's different. And Morathi was about to win the day one more time, even though everybody disagreed with her. And it wasn't until Anarian's other kids turn up that it all turns around, the older kids to Malekith. And that's important because in many respects, they were just respecting tradition. The Everqueens come back. Great. The idea of a Phoenix King is a new idea. This is not something that has been established for centuries and centuries of specialness. No, Anarian was special. He was the first. And they were discussing, what do we do now that he's gone? And the Everqueen comes back and says, we don't do that. But you know what? My father set up something that is important, and I think that we should vote among ourselves for a new version, but it shouldn't be simply passed from father down to son, because that would be my other brother, pardon me.
Yeah, Morellian didn't want it.
But Morellian didn't want it. Okay, so we should move past this and do something different. And she brings a different voice. It's very much a Kadai voice rather than Morathi's far firmer, no, we should be fighting. The fight hasn't ended yet. And Malekith, in some respects, looked like he was representing that. But he, with good grace, says, no, fair enough. This is what you've decided to do. And he backs down. Morathi, though, is still caught up with her grief, the war that she thinks she's just lost, and all the other elves think they've just won. She thinks it's basically just the calm before a true storm. This is no win. But she is very much on the losing side for all the arguments because they think they've won, because they think the war is over, but it isn't. It's just one battle in the prolonged war to come.
Yeah. So Morathi puts up a bit of a, we'll say, disagreement before Malekith goes, Mommy, chill. You're embarrassing me. Calm down.
I'm chill.
And she does say something that, once again, this was written before the end times was a thing. Where Morathi is quoted as saying at Belshazzar's coronation, where he walks through the flame, where she looks at her son, she says, this entire thing is a farce because he's not actually walking through the flame. He's protected by spells. Anarian was not protected by spells. He's not the true Phoenix King.
Yep. And that, I think, is fascinating. And it's not fascinating for the reason you might be thinking. Oh, because that matches really well with the end times, doesn't it? No, it's fascinating because Morathi's doing this. Oh, Azurin, the divine creator, has not accepted this one. The elves are having to use magic to protect this new Phoenix King from Azurin's divine wrath. This is not how it's supposed to be. What is going on here? And again, a classic example of Morathi saying things that no one else believes. They are effectively destroying what her husband had done and the change that he had wrought, the forcing of Azurin to make a direct hand, and Azurin just let it happen because that's what Azurin does. Azurin just ignores shit. He doesn't care. Yeah. So that's the thing.
Yeah, because it's funny. A lot of elves sort of skirt on the whole Anarian had to die. Like he literally burnt to death before he got back up. And they just kind of mesh over that. But anyway, so in the interest of time, pressing forwards, because there's a certain point I want to get to in the stream. So, and we're doing horrible on time.
We're just
I know. We're not gonna. I'm hoping
this might be a three-parter. I don't care because I really love Morathi and I think she's a character that she deserves to have the time given to her. So let's just take it as it comes.
Yeah. So the next big thing that happens is, of course, Malekith goes out to do Malekith things and become Malekith the Great. At his mother's advice, she tells him, "Go out and see the world. Go out, explore." Become a hero. Go do things. Follow in your father's footsteps. Because Anarian went out and explored the world. A lot of people forget about.
But the next bit much cooler because we all know Malekith's story because it's what most of the army lists focus on. They
So
focus on what Malekith did next, and they make it quite clear that Malekith had come from an abusive household where mum and dad argued, and dad wasn't cool, but he was also the coolest thing in the world, a literal god. And he is pretty much doing his best to hold everything together. His dad's now dead. The world has changed. The politicians have taken everything that he was expecting to get away from him, and he is holding it up. And his mum says, look, you are your father's son. Go off and be your father. And there is a strong idea here as well that Morathi herself might be looking to turn him into, in many respects, an Aryan. Now, I don't mean turning him into a god. I don't mean turning him into this great figure for the elves. I mean turning him into someone that she can't predict. That's what's important, because that's what she needs. Because as far as she's concerned, the end is still certain. The world is coming to an end, and she can see it, and she's looking for a new way to get through it. So what does she do when Malekith is away? Oh, it's great.
So Morathi heads back to Nagaroth, and she reestablishes herself as basically the princess or queenish of. She's not supposed to call herself queen because she's no longer married to the Phoenix King, but she kind of finagles her way around it a little bit. But she sets up in Nagaroth, and Morathi starts building up a plan to basically disrupt this new Phoenix King and set up for her son to come home. And this is a long-term plan. This sucker takes centuries to come to fruition. But she's credited with doing one thing in particular that, before we kind of get into like the whole cult of pleasure stuff or cult of excess, that I find fucking fascinating. And it's not covered in every version of the story, but there's several versions of the story that talk about that Morathi at this point in time, and this is supported by Hellebron's story, when you get into Hellebron's story, she changes the relationship the elves have with the gods. She completely changes it.
And she does it in a way that's interesting, because there's different stories here and they don't quite link, but they're linked. Because when she becomes effectively the Queen of Nagaroth, she isn't doing what all of the stories say that she was doing. In fact, I'm going to call out some proper bullshit here, because almost every description of Morathi says something like this. Morathi is the master manipulator who likes to hide behind the scenes and pull the strings. Bullshit. She was queen, and then she became Queen of Nagaroth. She wasn't doing it with someone else sitting in power. She led them. And when she led Nagaroth, Nagaroth flourished.
Yep, they're doing great.
This section is brilliant because she brings up a whole host of, let's keep it simple. She supports the arts. She allows the elves to flourish in their new world. She promotes the elves to work with everybody else. She's got some really lovely bits where the core poets and playwrights and artists of the era are all supported by her court. And the greatest names of the high elves that they refer to back in the modern high elf era, and they look back, all come from Nagaroth's court, because she was the great patron of the elves. Not the high elves, the elves. But the high elves now view them as their figures, because they claim everything that happens in Ulthuan. But the great works of art, of architecture, of brilliance from this era all come from her. And it's because she strongly believes in the cult of what has been often marked down as the cults of excess. She is now imposing upon the elves the idea that the gods need to be a more important component within their lives. They're no longer distant figures sitting out on the other side. They need to be present. They need to be here. And she effectively creates cults.
Yep, because one of the things that's talked about is that the priests of the old elves were not priests as we understand them now, even by elven standards. Morathi makes the modern version of priest. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about the high elf priests, like priests of all, priests of Aishad, all this stuff, or your wood elf priests, or your dark elf priests. And if you want a really good example of this, go read the story. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Hellebron has a book about Hellebron becoming a Cainite. Morathi sets her up on that.
Yep.
And Hellebron introduces a brand new form of Cainite worship to the colonies. because Morathi basically manipulates her into it.
Yeah, we're going to sum this entire era up for Morathi. It is our gods have left, and we no longer have a relationship with our gods, but they are still out there and they still love us, they still want us, and importantly, the gods fucking hate chaos, and I hate chaos. So I'm going to bring everything that they have been taken, that they had and was taken away from us, and I'm going to bring it back to the elves. And it's not just because those gods are super important and powerful and useful and love the elves. It's because I can then manipulate people better through the use of all of these cults. And elven cults are not like human cults, where we don't have ourselves priests leading great sermons and doing all the rest of it. It's more like they manifest as a perfect example of that god. They try to replicate it in many respects, similar to how some people view dwarves and their ancestor worship. But instead, they are very similar in terms of how they act with godly intention, and they speak to the gods on their terms, and that's perfect because all the gods hate chaos, and it makes the elves in turn far better warriors that she can manipulate and control. And Nagarath is at the heart of this, and the great courts of both the Kadai and the Kairathi all together are in many respects centered around a lot of what Nagara is offering. She's effectively building not just the dark elves, but also the high elves, and in time, the wood elves. If you want to have a single figure who is responsible for effectively what the elves become, it's not an Aryan. He was only influential for some 30, 40 years. Morathi is there from the beginning, when the old ones are there, all the way through to an Aryan. And then when an Aryan's gone, she reshapes the elves completely, and they don't even notice it's happening because they think that they're doing what they should be doing, effectively revering their gods who have now left them, revering their gods and being like them. But it's all at Morathi's manipulation. Everything that is about to occur over the course of the next so many centuries is purely because Morathi sat down and went, how can I build the best weapons for the end times that I perceive coming?
Yep. And this leads to, and Morathi, she sets this up well in the colonies, where she introduces big forms of worship with the Hellebron storyline. That storyline, I'm going to TLDR it because it would be better to focus on it from a Hellebron perspective because it's such a huge part of her story. The basic way I'll TLDR is the surface level reading, which is very funny, but not really the case, is that Hellebron was so naturally gorgeous that Morathi got jealous of her. And so she was like, oh, fuck her. She's prettier than me. How dare you? When in reality, Hellebron was Morathi met her and saw in her an incredibly useful piece and gave her just the right nudge in the direction where Hellebron would go on to become the most scary ass Cainite ever. And
she creates the entire cult of Cain, as in Morathi creates it through others, and Hellebron is the primary tool of this. And that means that Hellebron must hate Morathi because Morathi represents something different, and it's a core component of making sure that Hellebron is the best Cainite that she possibly can be. Morathi's manipulating her from beginning to end, and whilst the individual stories by individual authors often don't kind of realize what they've set up, other stories elsewhere pretty much spell it out in black and white. The 6th edition army list has got a lovely little story that I've already mentioned, where it quite clearly states, oh, here comes Hellebron. Oh, why do you hate her? I don't. She's just a tool, and I want her to hate me because it's an important component of her doing everything that we need her to do. Morathi she's a piece of work.
Yeah. She's awful in so many ways.
Yeah.
So she
makes Hellebron what she is, and Hellebron is awful. What a life.
Yeah. So
I'm looking forward to her stream.
Yeah, so she spreads the cults of access back in Ulthuan, and she does so in a very clever way where they start to get out of control. They start to get loud and noticeable, especially because life in Ulthuan is so great that a lot of elves are getting bored, and Morathi takes advantage of it. And
I think it's worth noting as well that there is 2 different interpretations for the cults of excess. And that's because Games Workshop has had 2 different interpretations. All the way up to the most recent 8th edition stuff, the cults of excess were pleasure cults of Slaanesh. That's how they were written, and that's how they were pitched, and they were used by Morathi to effectively control and manipulate from within to do whatever Morathi was wanting to do.
In 7th and 8th, they're Kithrai pleasure cults. They get rid of the Slanesh terminology.
And 7th, they might be. In 8th, they are. 8th is one that really pins it down hard. And 7th, it's all sort of a bit.
Because 7th introduced like a shitload of new gods.
Yeah, 7th just goes, there's all this other stuff. And then they don't really pin down what it means. And then 8th pins it down in place. And they make it clear that the cults of excess are not Slanesh cults, although some of them are. What they are is the cults that are to the underworld gods, in effect. So you're now talking your Hecate and the dark magic. And these are a core component of what it is to be an elf. But the Phoenix King that they have at this point has gone back to the Kadai way of doing things. And the Phoenix King is pushing hard. And she believes in no uncertain terms that if the Phoenix King is Kadai, the world will end because they will be weak. It's as simple as that. So she is working hard to bring back the underworld gods and everything that they represent. Now, Azurin may have basically said, you can't do what you wanted to do on the world. You are banned from coming to the world. Morathi said, yeah, but the elves are still here and we can still do it. Screw Azurin and the divine plan. We are going to do it and we're going to take the war to chaos. And the cults of excess start spreading through. And excess sounds Slanesh. That's why they sort of mix the language up a bit later.
So in any event, King Snorri dies. Morathi goes to see her son to comfort him, but also give him a little nudge to do something. And not just be sad.
It's worth noting, go watch our King Snorri stream to understand why King Snorri dying is super important. Oh, sorry, Grombrindle stream. I mean, King Snorri. Go watch our Grombrindle stream for why this is an enormously important event for Malekith.
Yeah, so Malekith goes and does some stuff in the north for a little bit, gets his iron circlet, comes back home, and he comes back home to basically he's Malekith the Great. He returns as this great hero, and he's like, hey, Phoenix King, I've heard about all this pleasure cult shit you got going on. I'm here to help. And they go, cool. Belshazzar says, you know what, Malekith? You're pretty cool. I trust you. Here's my remit to go do things. Go root out these pleasure cults. And Malekith goes, great. Malekith, at this point, genuinely does not know his mother is behind it.
Yep.
And he does a very good job, genuinely. He does an awesome job using all the skills he's developed, and he follows the train back up to mom. And they get a big confrontation. And there's a whole thing about, as well as like you've got the clan that Elithanar, the Anar family, are also kind of in charge of parts of Nagaroth, and they really don't like Morathi, and Morathi doesn't really like them. She owns their asses politically. It's a massacre. They haven't fully done the fight yet, but she's isolated them from all the other noble houses because she didn't like them. And this builds up to Malekith comes home and he fights his mom. And they have this big epic duel where Morathi beats him with magic, but Malekith has learned a lot. And he's got that circlet, which makes him closer to her level. And Malekith manages to just brute force his way through the magic difference. And he gets it to the point where he basically has a sword at her throat. He overwhelms her physically. And this is where we get a pivotal moment in time that would one day make for a cool What If episode, which is that Malekith has to decide whether or not he kills his mother here. And she talks to him. And she sort of doesn't know exactly what he's going to do at this point.
And I think this is key. I'm going to interrupt here because this to me, because we know who she is and just how much she can perceive the future. It suggests the Iron Circlet has broken him in terms of his clear threads of fate. Something has occurred. She has sent him off to basically become another Anarian, someone that she can't properly read. And she has got one. And he's come back and she doesn't know how it's going to turn out. And this, if anything, will fill her with giddiness, but also deep fear because, hey, he kind of beats his ass. I mean, he beats her ass.
Yeah, so they have this whole exchange, and basically she manages to convince him, where she says, hey, you can arrest me, take me to the Phoenix King, let the Phoenix King pass judgment on me. Don't murder me, because if you kill me, people are going to say you're a kinslayer, and you'll never be king. That's bad for your image. Whereas I'll tell you everything I know. I'll work with you to help. Like she plays him. She plays the shit out of him, and he falls, and he falls for it hook, line, and sinker. So Malekith takes her back, and there's a whole big hearing court thing where she basically is dragged in front of the Phoenix King's court, and they have this big debate and everything. And there are some clever elves who go, this lady's really dangerous. And Belshazzar makes a mistake, which is that he goes, I'm going to lock her up in my palace, because surely locked up, watched under guard day and night in my palace, she will not be able to manipulate things further from here. And oh boy, was he wrong.
Yeah. Cults of pleasure, the cults of excess, the cults of whatever you want to call them, continue to be absolutely controlled by her from top to toe. And that's all of them. That includes the Slaanesh cults. Let's not be under any illusion here. She uses chaos to get what she wants. And at the moment, she is playing and pulling at the strings, because what is currently occurring, she believes, and it's written in more than one place, she actually believes that the current Phoenix King and the Phoenix Kings as they stand in Ulthuan will bring about the end of the world. She is convinced the Kada'i are going to ruin everything. Absolutely convinced. So she's doing everything in her power to counteract that.
Yeah. And of course, in brutal irony, if you go check out like our Malekith streams and stuff, or our Phoenix King tier rating stream, had she not, her and Malekith not done what they were about to do, they probably would have got what they wanted, but they get a little impatient and they assassinate Belshazzar. She gives Malekith the poison he uses to kill him.
Yeah, there's a really nice bit. I recommend go reading the timeline from the perspective of the Dark Elves in the 6th edition army list, because they take a very unique view as to all this story, which is very much the High Elves literally sucked. They had to be stopped. If they weren't stopped, chaos were coming now.
Yeah.
And it's a really fun, different angle. Do recommend reading that one, because it takes a different view to how the High Elves often pitch it.
Yeah. And this is where we get to some really exciting parts. Really exciting parts that I know a lot of y'all have been asking about, so I'm not going to stop yet. So the Sundering happens, right? Malekith goes into the flame. He stops halfway, throws himself back out. Morathi goes, oh shit, that's not great. And they grab her son. They murder all the other princes. Y'all run away. Morathi here plays the game like an ace and frankly just gets unlucky. She immediately identifies that Prince Emmerich was not there. He was supposed to be. He was supposed to be at the Shrine of Assurance so he could be killed. He didn't show up. He ignored the summons because they couldn't find him because he was out hunting in Krace. And she immediately sends assassins to go kill him. And through just sheer stupid luck, a group of fucking white lions of Krace, as we will come to know them, some huntsmen, just happened to be near the Phoenix King, and they save him from these assassins. Which, if it hadn't been for that, Morathi had it. She had it. But just like with the first Phoenix King meeting, just a quirk of fate gets her at the last second.
And if you're looking for a justification for why a seer couldn't do that, you have to make one up. I'll give a clean one for this. LAWhammer, which is my version of how it all runs out, has a real reason for this. It's because the leader of them was on a path that hid them from being seen by seers, because Morathi had changed how religion interacted with the elves as a whole, and some of the elves had found ways to hide themselves from seers, and this was something that she was actually a victim again of her own success. But that's not part of this text. What is very clear is that somehow she makes a mistake. It's not just a quirk of fate. She does not see something that should have been seen. And that's problematic.
There does kind of seem to be this isn't written, but like if you're taking what's written at face value, it seems like after the cataclysm, seer powers become much less reliable. Like Destiny and Fate is a lot more complicated than it used to be.
And you need some form of justification for that. I built one for my game. Come up with your own one for yours. Come up with your
own. Anyway, contrary to what you might actually expect, I'm gonna kind of fast forward through the Sundering, because a lot of what Morathi does is mostly she participates in some major battles. She has a big fight over at the Gaean Vale, which ends up causing the Gaean Vale to become a fucking island because the Everqueen blows up the land bridge, which that fight takes a lot out of Morathi, and she's kind of more of political player, like organizing armies and stuff, which is actually a lot of what she did for Anarian. Fun fact about Morathi is that Anarian often didn't draw up most of his battle plans. Morathi did.
Yeah.
She did a lot of his strategies for him.
He lost a lot of his mind though.
Yeah,
it's
he
no
was a great
surprise.
beat stick. He was a great beat stick. But yeah. So anyway, so she helps her son a lot with various parts of the war. This is where the House of Anar falls, where her master plan that she's been building up for centuries comes to a head, and she eliminates the one house in Nagaroth that she knows isn't, and their friends that are not loyal to Malekith. And basically, in almost a single night, she massacres the Anar household and all that, which leads to Elithnar.
And again, a lot of people ascribe these actions to her individual lust for power and need for her son to gain absolute authority, and they're right to do so. But the reasoning that she has behind it is not simply that. She honestly believes that she is doing the best things for the elves as a whole, because she believes the world is going to go boom.
Yeah.
She is fully convinced of this, and she thinks that the things that she's eliminating are effectively like cutting away the bad bits of flesh so that they're left with something lean and powerful at the end. She does not think about individual lives as anything more than things to use or get rid of, depending on how useful they are to her. So it's a unique brand of evil.
Yeah. So the war rages on. A lot of it is obviously much more focused on Malekith and what he's up to. Builds up. Malekith suffers his big final defeat against Emmerich, and he retreats to Anlek, and they try and undo the vortex, which obviously doesn't go well because literally no one at that point knew what the situation with Kalidor was precisely, and the odds that he was basically just alive in there and would just be able to suddenly turn around and just unleash this horrific counterspell that didn't actually dispel. It literally was just a bounce that bounced everything back at the Dark Elves, or well, what will become the Dark Elves, was literally no one could have predicted that. He's not in time.
Yeah, the 7th edition version of this is quite good in terms of how it pitches it. The 8th edition one removes a bunch of words, but the 7th edition one, as it stands, says something along these lines. The Dark Elves, as they were about to become, Malekith and his crew, had realized that they were defeated, and that the great plan that they had, which was ultimately to defeat chaos, to rule, is going to come to an end, which means the world is doomed from their perspective. So they try to undo the vortex to claim all of the old power they once had, to become so powerful the chaos gods themselves will bow before them. And there's a lovely little bit where they're like, we're going to take all of the chaos gods' powers and we're going to use it to destroy them. It's going to be fucking amazing. This is the great plan that Morathi had. Morathi is behind the great coven of sorceresses, and Malekith is wholly on board with basically falling in with his father's original plan. And that plan is bring down the vortex that his father never wanted, bring back all the power, and then bring the chaos gods to heal, which is something that he will do multiple times in the future by summoning greater demons as and when he needs them and using them when he's desperate. But he wants to bring them to heal. So he supports his mum's plan. They all get together. They try to undo the vortex. And Kalidor, who started that vortex, hard nopes them out and goes, nope!
Yeah, he
with
had
all of the power that he has in the era of high magic beforehand. And even though he is going against what are almost certainly far more powerful on the page sorcerers, because they're in an era of weak magic by comparison, it just doesn't work. But to give you an idea of what these weaker sorcerers are capable of doing, this destroys Ulthuan as we understand it. Where it was once one enormous floating island, it becomes a fractured hellhole. Entire provinces, kingdoms are riven, cracked apart.
Yeah, roughly
the
a
Dark
third
Elves,
of Ulthuan sinks.
Yes, sinks. It's proper Atlantis, but not quite. It's like the pre-Atlantis story. Atlantis will come later. Ulthuan doesn't completely sink yet. And the Dark Elves that who are fleeing just go to their cities and flee in their entire cities.
Yeah, they're like, fucking let's stick the whole thing.
How big their spells were, and that gives you an idea of how much power Calador and his cabal on the inside threw outwards. It wasn't just he threw out and it was a defense against what the Dark Elves were trying to unbind. It was also magic that they could use to try and get the fuck out. Because if they could do that all the time, trust me, they would be. If they could just blow Ulthuan up by doing that, they'd be doing it all the time.
Now's the part
not that easy.
I've been wanting to get to this entire stream.
We're going to get there.
Yeah, which is that. So they go to Nagorond. They start establishing territory. And Morathi reveals a secret, which is that and I'm going to say this because I've seen people asking, and here's the big truth for you, that Morathi is so seductive. Morathi is so good at what she does that when Anarion was with her, Anarion himself, broken and beaten as he was, and Ashurin, who is we'll call him a cold, distant figure, may not have fallen in love with her. But somebody did. And that was Cain. Cain fell in love with Morathi. And somewhat ironically, she doesn't really love him back.
It's almost a flip. She'd learned.
Yeah. And at this point, all that time she's been building up those cults of excess, all the time she's been changing the nature of the relationship with the elves and their gods, she's been making the Kithari very, very happy. And so they give to her a series of truths and artifacts, the likes of which the world has never seen. And Morathi, out of seemingly nowhere, but it's been building up this entire time, reaches the point where Cain finally breaks and gives her the secret to eternal youth and an extreme form of power in the cauldrons of blood.
Yeah. This is where everything sort of changes for the Dark Elves. And in many respects, we are left with a couple of conclusions we can make. One is, this is what she was looking for all along, and this is not an outcome that she didn't expect. This is what she had been spending the last centuries working towards, and that was getting the gods, the underworld gods that hate chaos with a passion and have been banned from the world by Azurin, to push against those boundaries and give the elves something back in return. And the cults that she had been building all the way through the previous centuries almost went pop and came to life. And she becomes, if anything, not much more powerful than she was before, because before, during the Cataclysm, she was probably much more powerful, more akin to what we assume as gods in terms of overall power. Yeah. Because during the Cataclysm, magic was different, but she becomes much more powerful than she was before, because she gains access to some extraordinarily potent artifacts, which, by the way, don't break Azurin's ban for the gods coming, because they're not gods, they're just things. And as we know, the gods constantly drop artifacts into the material realm. There's lots of examples of artifacts that say something along the lines of, oh, and the god passed by and dropped 10 of these, and they have been found here, 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 and here. I wonder where the other 5 are. Those sort of artifacts, except they were given directly to Morathi. Now, if you want to go with the word love, which is very much the Bride of Cain and how she's pitched, that works perfectly, because that's the story, the myth in many respects. But instead, you could say that Cain was in love with everything that she offered, which was an entire faction of elves who would do everything in their fucking power to bring about the end that he wants, the destruction of the Chaos Gods. War. Not little W war, not sitting over an Ulthuan, biding your time because it doesn't look like Chaos is attacking just now. Actual war. And all of the gods that agreed with him, the underworld gods, banding together. Hecate saying, yes, and here's all the dark magics that come from chaos. We will master it. And all of those underworld gods bound together under Morathi. She had built all of these cults over the course of the last however many centuries, and they were unleashed amongst the Dark Elves. So the great war that Kane had been pretty much banned from was given back to him. Morathi was tempting.
So remember how I told you all earlier about the whole thing that Morathi literally changes the gods, which he's done twice already. If you've been paying attention, this is the third one, because she breaks them. Not in the sense of like shattering their minds, but she convinces them to give her everything. She creates the cauldrons of blood. She creates the blood-racked shrines of authority. She's led to and finds the piece of Hecate's artifact, a piece of Hecate's fucking dagger, one of her 6 artifacts. Yep. She teaches the methods of savagery of Anath Rayma to what will become the Beastmasters to dominate the dragons without the need of the dragon song and the hydras and all these horrible monsters. Every single member of the necromancy of Erith Kial and controlling these spirits and shrieking wraiths. Every Kithari gives her everything.
And it's fucking amazing. No other way of putting it. She basically says what the Kadai are doing is wrong. They're going to doom the world. And I, over here, have an entire group. It's almost like she wanted the Sundering. It's almost like this was actually her plan. And there is no world in which this actually being her plan is wrong. This could be the outcome she was looking for. The Dark Elves were the intent because the elves as a whole had decided to become Kadai. They had decided. And she could not countenance it because effectively that was going into Azurin's great plan, which is ultimately passivity. It's effectively, we're fine, everything's okay, we'll just wait it out, it'll be cool. And she is not up with that at all. In the slightest, she is all about action. So she provides the gods with the ultimate action, and the Dark Elves are created, and they are. Now, if you read the Dark Elf army lists, what it will say is Malekith, 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 and Morathi was sitting behind the scenes. Malekith, 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 Malekith. It's literally the story of Malekith. It's like if you move over to the High Elf army list, it says an Aryan, an Aryan, an Aryan, an Aryan. Morathi was behind the scenes. An Aryan, an Aryan, an Aryan, an Aryan. Morathi was there somewhere. She's horrible. He hated her. Morathi, well, she's rubbish. She's horrible. She really ruined it with frickin' Malekith and everything. They all went off. They tried to destroy the Vortex, which was a great victory because High Elves rock, right? Not from their perspective. As far as those gods that they were allied with was concerned, the Vortex was a crime. It was the worst because it took away their greatest weapon in the material plane against the ruinous powers. And Morathi went, hey, we could do it a different way. And she completely rebuilt the elves and their gods. And it's kind of astonishing.
Yep. Can we get Morathi working on climate? Well, listen, I don't think her methods... She
would just murder everyone.
Yeah. She would come in and be like, oh, simple. We kill enough people that it's no longer a problem.
Pretty much. She has a unique way of dealing with things.
We got to the thing I really wanted to say, so now I can get caught up on Super Chats. And then, honestly, we might be going into the...
We might have to stop this, and do ourselves a quick summary and move to our next step.
Donovan, I really think we need one Dark Elf female character in full heavy armor, and more importantly, one almost naked Dark Elf male character. We need hot goth boyfriend material for those at the Persuasion... That Persuasion 2, damn it. I think you missed my long one at the start. Okay, so we did do that one, Donovan, because I remember doing that one. That's one thing I actually really appreciate about Total War. Total War heavily expanding a lot of the types of characters and units we got to see. Like, I love their female Dreadlord, the one with the mask. She is, but good, you know, for our sad hot goth boys, we do have the Doomfire Warlocks. They're pretty sad. I could fix them material for anyone out there that wants mostly naked Dark Elf dudes. Singemeister, Morathi could have done what End Times Lilith did. Morathi would have been a much better character for that role.
Yeah. So this is something that I literally said to a friend of mine when the book came out. I said, I've just read it, and they've really, really really messed up Lilith. Makes no sense at all. Why the fuck didn't they use Morathi? And the reply I got was, what the fuck? Morathi? What the fuck would she be doing with any of this? Like, do you not know who she is? Fuck's sake. And hopefully we've done some steps towards understanding just how much Morathi was not just knee deep, she was neck deep in the gods and the gods' great plan. And even if we have Lilith and the loose story of everything that the elven gods were, Morathi would have been a core component of all of this because she had been doing it since the beginning of time.
Yeah, God forbid, either in part 2 or God forbid part 3. I'm pretty sure we can finish this in a part 2.
I hope so.
We will probably mention Morathi storyline the end times. It sucks. It's so
we're gonna
bad.
have to. It's just
so
not good.
Bad.
But we have to discuss it.
Yeah, Chris M. No question, just supporting. Oh well, thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Yar Olaf. Hey guys, love your content, bit off topic, but do you think Morathi / Dark Elves get some more Slanesh goodness in the upcoming DLC? I fucking hope so.
I think the most designers for Morathi basically just make her a Slanesh character because it's what she appears to be. But at their best, Morathi is a manipulator of Slanesh, and Slanesh kind of loves it.
Yeah, listen, I just want anointed. I just want anointed.
Yeah,
for Slanesh
anointed.
And Dark Elves. It'd be such a cool unit. Brock 6000. Maybe she wants an elf to actually walk through the flames so her husband, the Anarian with the 2 gods in him, can come back, even if it's via her son. So, no, but there's a storyline we'll talk about that I don't know how I ultimately feel about it, which the end times revolved very heavily around with Morathi. That we'll talk about that, which what I'll say is Morathi's obsession with Anarian, I think, was very cool until the end times twisted it into something weird.
I agree.
The way Age of Sigmar handled it felt like what it should have been.
It was better.
Instead of what the end times did, with her like basically being like, oh, Tyrion looks exactly like him. It's my husband reborn. I'm going to suicide everything I've ever done because this hot kid looks like my husband. It's a weird storyline.
It's not a good storyline for a character who's older than the world almost.
Jack Flanagan. Hello. I was fortunate enough to wake up
you.
for the stream this morning. Gonna go back to work, catch it from the beginning, but as always, thank you both, Andy and Sotek, for making these streams. Your enthusiasm and knowledge. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to a Morathi stream for some time, so this one's got me very excited, and thank you very much for that one.
Yep. Oh gosh, would you mind grabbing the next one? There's a comment I wanted to hunt down really
Okay,
fast.
you want me to go find that? I wasn't looking for it. I'm scrolling.
Oh, no, sorry, I got it.
I was just there too.
In Grombrindal, Chronicles of the Wanderer, Grombrindal duels Morathi. This got me wondering: is Grombrindal stronger in AOS than he was in Fantasy? It's a bit
Grombrindal's as strong as he needs to be.
Yeah, Grombrindal. I mean, he's more like a comic book character almost.
Yeah, he is. He's almost a meme.
Yeah, it's difficult. I wouldn't worry about it. Just enjoy. Just
it's
enjoy.
A little bit like One Punch Man.
Yeah, just enjoy the fun, flashy lights.
Yeah, he's more of a story vehicle than he is necessarily a clearly defined set of characteristics.
Yeah, I wanted to grab this one because I saw it earlier. Unseen Archives. Greetings, Lorebeards. I just got home after discharging from a week in the hospital after a major surgery. Going to sleep for a few hours, but I want to let you know your content helped me survive the ordeal. We just want to wish you best recovery and thank you for the sweet words and feel better soon, dude.
Yeah.
Donna Man, an important note timeline-wise that surprised me when I discovered it. The main part of the civil war between Malekith killing Beljanar and the actual sundering of the Vortex Ritual is only 28 years. Well, this is a long war. It's very short by elf standards, especially given the importance of the events. By the contrast, the War of Vengeance lasted 400 years. Yeah, it was vicious. That's the big thing. It was fucking vicious. That's why it was so fast.
Yep.
Brock 6000. I guess having way less magic and no gods also contributed to the elves falling to ennui, like teenagers stuck at home with no parents and computers. Ennui, whatever.
Ennui. Yeah, and to a degree, yes. There's several discussions concerning this. That the winds of magic were flooding through the world, and the elves were just in a different place. Their immortal lives were no longer quite as immortal as they once looked. They could sort of subsist off the winds of magic in a weird way. note, vampires will be coming later doing almost exactly that in a different way. It's almost like they came from dark elf rituals from Morathi. But magic changes and the elves in turn change, and bringing the gods back into their lives brings the elves back into a different place. Thanks, Morathi.
You're right. You
that one came up twice. Yep.
Hammond, he fights his mom in bed. Yeah, with his sword.
Yeah,
at her throat. Yeah.
So if you go with different versions of the background, you will get different answers to this. Some will say, yeah, no, that's icky and weird. Others will say, absolutely. Not only that, but the armor that has been forged and welded to him isn't and can come off. And he is broken and in absolute agony, and only his mother provides him with any true comfort in those circumstances. And it's very easily to go, ew, sex, ha, ha, ha. But they've just got a different morality to everybody else. They view things differently. They're elves, try not to think of them as human, and it comes out a lot better.
Ricky Chapman, our campaign about getting transported to the Warhammer world where we met Morathi, we caught her off guard by talking to her of things she wasn't expecting the last time she talked to her husband. Wow, that seems like a really good way to get shot. But you know, I assume you survived the ordeal. Good job. Donovan, I wonder why Morathi couldn't see that Belshazzar was going to make Malekith Phoenix King. Well, if you go with what me and Andy were talking about earlier, that might not have been the goal. In truth.
Yeah. So I think if I was rationalizing everything there, I would just make this is actually what Morathi wanted. She didn't want Malekith to be,
not yet,
at that point, the Phoenix King. And she definitely didn't want it to run through. It wasn't that she moved too early, it's that she moved at exactly the right point to ensure that Malekith became what the gods needed him to be, so that they could take the war directly to Chaos in a way that the High Elves never would, or indeed, as it was at that point, the elves never would. She effectively created a military force out of the elves, and that was the Dark Elves, and they kept it sharp by fighting Chaos, by fighting elves, the High Elves, and by fighting others. They're effectively a giant weapon that needs to be wielded, and Malekith is the one that's wielding them, and she needed him to be that. And whenever he moves away from being that, she fucks with his life and ruins it. We'll discuss that in the next stream.
Yep. Firesnake 905. Zinch, why does Celeste get to have all the fun with the elves?
Because Morathi made that to happen.
Yeah.
I'm almost certainly Morathi is behind this, because she makes deals with Slaanesh to get shit. If you want an excuse or a reason for why all the elf souls go to Slaanesh and why there's a special relationship, it's Morathi's fault. She did that ages ago. She has made so many deals with the Chaos Power that is Slaanesh, and they have got repercussions.
Yep. Also, Zinch always gets fucking spotlight. Let Slaanesh have his moment.
Yeah, Slaanesh gets a moment.
Randy Rando, Morathi got a vision of the great plan from the old ones themselves. If you want to argue that, you
seems to be probably the most likely outcome. Because if you're looking for a source for visions, it's always out external. It doesn't just happen. That's not how the Warhammer world works. There's always cause and effect, particularly in the material realm, which means it came from somewhere. And there is exceedingly few choices for people who can manipulate elves in Ulthuan underneath the old one's sway. And your real options are really only those who have the potential to see the future. And we know at this point in history, that the old ones wanted the cataclysm to occur. They wanted all of this to happen. We know this pretty much for certain with the old world texts and everything that it offers. So they do seem to be the best culprit. Ultimately, she's a tool of the old ones.
Donovan, I think it could be interesting if some of the High Elf colonies begrudgingly follow Ulthuan due to protection, but don't really like how they treat the Kadai and Kitharai and view things more like the original elf religion. Or maybe they value Mathland above all others, like Azrai value Isha and Kurnos. That should be the case. Like a lot of the colonies should have unique perspectives and personalities.
Agreed completely. The lack of that is actually slightly disappointing because every time the split between the gods is brought up, it is almost always accompanied with a little bit that says something like, and the high elves ignore them, except for important festivals or when it's essential to not ignore them, which means that even in Ulthuan, where they are effectively banned, they are still being revered under certain circumstances. The second you get away from that direct control, it's going to be a different picture, and different parts of the world are going to reflect the great mandala of elven gods in different ways. And I think that sadly, that's not really been reflected in how the colonies have been handled, and it would make for a better version of them, I think.
Yeah, and because funny enough, the Dark Elves are actually a good example of this that a lot of people don't really realize, where they tend to have a very Cain-centric culture. But if you go to the different cities, there are different cities that are more focused on other gods, and the Black Arcs, they just do their own fucking thing. They don't give a shit about what the rest of the Dark Elves are doing.
Yep, completely.
Super Unlock. Great stream, lads. Lots of fun out of context clips to be made. Well,
yeah, there will be.
Yeah. And that, unfortunately, is outro time.
Okay, let's get ourselves our outro. So we did not do Morathi.
Made it
in a single stream.
35% of the way there.
So what have we learned so far? We have learned that Morathi is one of the oldest characters in Warhammer. And we have also discussed that the elves are core to the story of the Warhammer world. But through examining Morathi's tale, you realize that the story of the elves has been entirely shaped by her. The High Elves exist. The Dark Elves exist. The gods and how they are used and worshipped and manipulated by the elves exist because of Morathi's choices, all of which started when she was tiny. And as a child and as a seer, she received visions which plagued her concerning the end of the world. And the gods themselves didn't believe her, meaning that none of the elves believed her. But she was so certain of her path that she forged her own way. And before the cataclysm had even come, had already made pacts, not just with chaos gods, but with many gods. Not the elven gods, others. At least not the elven gods as we understand them today. And when the cataclysm came, she was prepared. But she still couldn't see a way through to the world and the elves not being destroyed until she met Inarian. And Inarian changed everything. And if he'd just listened to her, very possibly, they would have won. And Age of Sigmar would have come far, far earlier, as the gods that rose from the mortal realms would have risen up and possibly even destroyed chaos. But a victim of her own success, or alternatively, a victim of the corruption that was running through Inarian, or a victim of something else. Inarian decided instead to side with Kalidor, a mage who had decided to lessen the world and the magic within it to ensure that none of the demons that were plaguing the world could destroy it. Morathi was so against this plan that we cannot express in clean words how much she hated it. And Inarian, for most of his existence, was also against it. But in the end, oh, yes.
I just want to add one little note about the whole thing. We're talking about how much she loved Inarian and his unpredictability and stuff. One of my favorite lines from Morathi when she's thinking about Inarian's decision to go help Kalidor instead of doing what she wanted, is she says she loves him as much as she hated him for making that decision. She loved it and hated it so much.
Because ultimately, that unpredictable nature was everything that she needed to achieve the impossible. And the impossible was an end where chaos didn't win, where they didn't ruin the world. Kalidor's choice to create the vortex against Morathi and Inarian's intention doomed the world. The High Elves saw it as a great victory because the demons disappeared. But the world was just given a stay of execution. A few thousand years extra. But the execution, as we know, come the end times would occur. But Morathi didn't stop. She loses her husband. She loses the argument with the elves concerning what they should do to stop the Chaos Gods. So she starts a new war. She changes the elves and the nature of their relationship with their gods. She basically creates high elf and dark elf religion and spins it. The mandala is probably her creation entirely. The entire point of the elven gods and the relationship with the elves is founded in the post-cataclysmic era because the gods have abandoned them and they needed a new relationship. And Morathi builds it. And ultimately, that turns into building the ultimate weapon, as she perceives it, against chaos, which is the Dark Elves, a living manifestation of the underworld gods, a mortal world manifestation of everything they stood for in their war against chaos. And so in love were the underworld gods with Morathi for this plan that they provided her with every material support that they could. They gave her more than just simply a weapon or two. They gave her immortality. They gave her everything that they had at their disposal still that they could, and provided it to Morathi and the Dark Elves in turn to be the great weapon. And that weapon was not simply to be honed to fight chaos by fighting chaos alone. It fought everything around them because they had to be the sharp edge. And this was not the great creation of Malekith, which is the story that the army lists tell, or Malarian, if you prefer. It's the story of Morathi, the story of the elves, and the story of their gods and what became of the Warhammer world after the Cataclysm, and where the High Elves believed that they had won that war, Morathi believed she had lost it. And that is where we'll be picking up next time, next Sunday, when we dive into what happens with the Dark Elves now that they've got all these underworld gods supporting them.
Dark Elves.
We made it to Dark Elves with Morathi. And in many respects, it shows why dealing with the Dark Elves, particularly their most important characters, is not really a discussion about Dark Elves. It's a discussion about elves, because many of them predate the concept of Dark Elf and High Elf, but they now define it. And Morathi goes out of her way to define the next several centuries of what will become the Great War between the Dark Elves and the High Elves, and the elves as a whole against chaos. And you might think, but the Dark Elves, they're not against chaos. They're often working with them. Yes, they are, because they use chaos for ultimately their goals. And that is what we'll be picking up next time.
Yep. Real quick before I grab the last few super chats, just things that are coming up. First of all, thank you for joining us. Second of all, next week we will be doing Morathi Part 2 because we're just going to keep going until we finish her. Though I will reveal that the vote for what will take place after Morathi, either on me or Andy's channel, just depending on where it ends up, will be the Norskin Dwarfs. So that'll be fun.
That will be fun.
Beyond that, this Wednesday we'll be doing our What If Mandrid Skaven Slayer had died in the final battle against Skaven. The Skaven had won instead, which is going to be pretty wild.
Yeah, this is going to be a wild one, I think. Looking forward to this one.
Should be a good time. LAWhammer, of course, this Friday at the usual time.
Episode 69, finally! Yeah, episode 69. It's been a little bit of a build-up, but we finally are at Horn and Sheath, episode 69. It's going to be a lot of fun. Oh, it's going to be a lot, not sheath, sheath. A sheaf of corn. It's classic imagery for Tal with his horns, and the sheaf of wheat for Raya, because they are just moving into Talabikland. And it is episode 69, dude. So we've got to make sure that that one lands right. That's going to be a lot of fun this Friday. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be nice to be back on the main timeline again.
Yep. And then Rookery, which has been killing it with some really, really good streams lately. I assume y'all are on this Saturday.
We've got Vera this Saturday.
Oh, very exciting. Vera, who y'all should all know because she was on here. She's been on here twice.
Yeah, she has.
And will likely be back relatively soon. I actually need to go check some numbers after this now I think about it. But so yeah, make sure to support one of our regulars coming on to the Rookery this Saturday, the usual time.
It's a good one.
And I think that's
that'll do for just now. So thanks everyone. I really enjoyed that one. We'll get our last little super chats. I think that the next steps will be almost as controversial as these ones for our next one, because Morathi is constantly sidelined in the core text while constantly bigged up elsewhere. So it's going to be interesting to continue on that tail and show where it lands as we move through time.
Yeah, if you really want to see me and Andy going off about the whole like creating a character and then not utilizing them very well, man, be here for next week.
Oh yeah, because we are going to probably really lay into the end times.
Donnie, I just thought if the old ones gave Morathi visions, that means they didn't share it with the elven gods if they opposed them. On a related note, the relationship between the gods in general who walk the world at the time of the old one seems like a big unknown, and it should stay that way.
And it's pretty clear. I mean, I can answer it very simply. The old ones wanted the end times. It makes sense of all of it. It's simple. And the elves being in ignorance was a core component of it.
Dumb, we did not do Morathi. Andy Law 2025 denying the allegations.
100% did that on purpose.
Frederico, which interactions Morathi had with the old ones? Probably don't know.
None. We don't know. I mean, she was in Ulthuan at the time when the old ones were doing their thing, but we also know that Ulthuan was effectively its own little isolated island doing its own thing with the elves and their gods doing their own thing. So there's no need for an interaction there.
Yeah, the only interaction that's ever written is that the Slan taught the very first elves magic, and that's it. Like Lord Croak was over there teaching lessons.
But that's not the old ones. I mean,
that's not the old ones. Yeah, that's just the Slan we know.
The Slan definitely. Slan 100% will be involved in it, and Morathi almost certainly knows a great deal more about lizardmen than the vast majority of other elves. But
especially when you come back and find out what she was doing in Lustria next week, because she did a lot in Lustria. All right, that's us. We're out of here.
Excellent.
Thank you all.
Until next time, it's going to be fun.
So much for joining, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.